what she intended. Now, she was not on the Capitol steps urging the attackers to breach police lines and smash through the doors on January 6th. That was not the role that she played. Different figures within this larger effort had different roles. But what became clear as December turned into January, as lawful means of preventing the certification of Joe Biden were exhausted, as nonviolent, even if unlawful means were exhausted, is that Margarie Taylor Greene nonetheless played an important role. And her role, even after she took the oath on January 3rd to uphold the Constitution and defend it against all enemies, foreign and domestic, was several-fold. To bring people to DC, again, not by providing trains and buses that would transport them directly, but rather through other means, to contribute in the planning, and to signal that January 6th would be, as she said herself on January 5th, our 1776 moment, a coded phrase with great significance. In fact, it turned out to be an 1861 moment. Instead of violence against a foreign empire, as we saw in 1776, she urged and encouraged and helped facilitate violent resistance to our own government, our democracy, and our Constitution. And in doing so, she engaged in exactly the type of conduct that triggers disqualification under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which is to say, she engaged in insurrection. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bott.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the Court. I represent Margarie Taylor Greene, Member of Congress of the United States, in this hearing. And Your Honor, this is a court of law. This is not a political candidate debate. This is not a place for political hyperbole. It is not a place for political smear. It's a court of law. And what we've just heard, there was not a word about the law. What does Section 3 of the 14th Amendment mean? What does the word insurrection mean? What does the word engage mean? Not a word. There was not a word about the First Amendment that prevents normal political speech and a hyperbole from being used against someone. Not a word. They think they're in the wrong place. Well, I plan to talk about the law. What does this mean? This very serious charge that has very broad ramifications to the rights of Representative Greene, the voters in her district, and our democracy. First, the right to vote is at stake, right here, right now, because they want to deny the right to vote to the thousands of people in the 14th District of Georgia by having Greene removed from the ballot. Those voters have a right to vote for the candidate of their choosing, and they have a right to have their vote counted. Now, the primary is May 24. Absentee ballots have already been printed. They will be mailed on May the 2nd, and early voting starts on May the 7th. And what is their hope is that there'll be a decision by the Secretary of State right before the primary, where she is immediately struck from the ballot. And those people that go into the polling place cannot vote for their candidate of their choice. Because by utilizing this procedure, the substantial constitutional and federal law violations that this candidacy challenge presents cannot be decided by this court. Unlike civil court or criminal court, which will always prioritize deciding issues of that magnitude before being subject to a trial, before being penalized by disqualification, and before the irreparable harm that will occur if that occurs. But that's the nature of the procedure. When can Representative Greene raise her constitutional defenses, like the evidence you are presenting violates the First Amendment to the Constitution? When are we going to be able to litigate that question? In state court. After she's disqualified, after she's stripped from the ballot, maybe after the primary occurs and she loses, well, nobody can vote for her, and obviously loses it. Well, whoop-de-ding. Okay? How do we recover from that? How do we go back from that? These are irrevocable. This is harm to the voters and to the candidate. Now, second, our democracy is at stake. It should be the voters, not government employees, public officials, judges, and lawyers who decide our elections. Voters have a right to vote for the candidate of their choice unless there's very compelling legal, not rhetorical, justification for that. Third, and which is not present here. Third, fundamentally, First Amendment rights are at stake. Not only the right to vote, as I've mentioned, or the right to run for office, but also the challengers will try to use the First Amendment protected political speech of Representative Greene as evidence of, quote, engaging in an insurrection or rebellion. That's unconstitutional and should not be allowed. And finally, the charge not only triggers disqualification, but is a serious federal criminal offense that she is being charged with. Now, this is a very serious matter, and the decision should be based on admissible evidence under the rules. We recognize that you have greater latitude than that, but the charges, the seriousness of the charges, we think warrant that adherence and faithful application of the law, and we expect that you will do that. Now, procedure. Georgia law, and here I am talking about the law. Georgia law 21-2-5 permits a candidate challenge under two circumstances. One, a candidate is not qualified to be a candidate. All right? And number two is a candidate is not qualified to take office. Of course, these are different conceptually and different in their application. So a claim under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment has to do with your ability to take office, because it doesn't address candidacy in any way. It's the ability of a representative in this case to take office because she has sworn the oath of office, engaged in insurrection or rebellion. Congress has not given her amnesty. And finally, when she presents herself to take the oath of office, she could be challenged, which we think is the exclusive constitutional right of Congress, not state officials, to decide whether or not she is eligible at that time to take office. So we're not dealing with a candidacy disqualification, we're dealing with a alleged take office qualification. Now, unfortunately, as I've mentioned, many of these issues cannot be decided by this court. even though you might make recommendations of the Secretary of State on the matter. And we have fully briefed this already in our motion to dismiss and to stay the proceedings. The constitutional claims, the federal law claims, the protections of the First Amendment, speech and debate, and what these words in Section 3 mean. So let's look at that. Admitted evidence is R2, which is the 14th Amendment, and it includes, of course, Section 3. And Section 3 provides that no person shall be a senator or representative in Congress, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, who, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or an officer of the United States, et cetera, to support the Constitution, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid and comfort to the enemies thereof. So there's a sequence. You have to have originally taken the oath, you have to then engage, and then you are disqualified, and Congress can determine that you're disqualified for having done that, from taking a subsequent oath, and therefore cannot assume your position as the member of Congress. And then furthermore, that Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such disability. And of course, that's the various amnesty acts that have been adopted or could be adopted by Congress. Okay? Now, this provision, as I mentioned, makes it clear this is about eligibility on January 3rd, 2023. Not today, not tomorrow, but eligibility when she presents herself as a re-elected member of Congress. She could be excluded under the exclusive power of Congress to judge the qualifications of its members. That's where these people should be. In Congress, explaining why she, once she is reelected, is disqualified from taking her seat. Now, the second thing that this sequence makes clear is that in her case, she took the office first, for the first time, and these are in our stipulated facts, on January the 3rd. That's the first time. And so she would have had to engage in insurrection or rebellion after January 3rd. In other words, under the Constitution, prior to January 3rd, she could have done it under the law. Now, it's preposterous that she would even consider it. She reveres the United States Constitution. But the way the statute or the constitutional provision is set up, she would have to have engaged after. So, evidence of anything she did prior to January 3rd is just completely irrelevant to the Section 3. Unless it is a direct admission of her intention to engage in insurrection or rebellion after January 3rd. Anything else she says is not only should be excluded because it doesn't fit the charge, right? But as I will soon demonstrate, it is protected by the First Amendment. Now here, words matter. And at every turn, the challengers mistake what the law is in their complaint. Obviously, they didn't discuss it here, but in their complaint. And calling something something doesn't make it something. Calling an orange an apple does not make the orange an apple. An orange has characteristics that are pre-established and are applied to determine whether the word apple applies. Here, the key phrases in Section 3 are themselves defined by the law. Now, they start off in misstating the law by saying that Representative Greene should be disqualified under Section 3. This is also called, by the way, the disqualification clause. Because she is someone who, quote, aided and engaged in an insurrection, end of quote. Complaint, page 1. Aided and engaged. Where is that in Section 3? It says, engaged in insurrection or rebellion, or gave aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. There's no aided and engaged in this. In this statute. Now, each of those phrases, engaged in insurrection or rebellion, that phrase, and its or accompanying phrase, gives aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. Each of those have special meaning. Engage is an act. It is a direct and overt act of insurrection. It is about, as one commentator said, domestic war. That's what engaged in insurrection or rebellion is about. The or, giving aid or comfort to the enemies thereof, as the same commentator said, is about foreign wars. Each of these phrases have been used several times in federal law and have come to gain particular meaning. They're words of art. So you can't take aid out of the second part about foreign wars and add it to the first part that is about domestic wars. That defies the rules of construction. It flaunts the technical and meaning of those phrases, of those words. So what is engaged and what does it mean? Well, engage connotes conduct, a direct overt act of insurrection to overthrow the United States government. It is about things like, which the people who drafted this well understood, many of them were part of the victorious, thank the Lord, Union Army, and they knew what an insurrection or rebellion was. So it was taking up arms, voluntarily joining the Confederate Army. It was about working in the War Department for the Confederate government. It was about providing supplies and equipment and material for the people who were conducting the war. So these were direct overt acts of insurrection. Now, instead of looking to that, what we have already heard described as their evidence, and of course is well revealed in their complaint, they want to hold against her First Amendment protected speech. And here's a few examples. On page 19, quote, "The people will remember the patriots who stood for election integrity," end of quote. That is supposed to be about an insurrection or engaging in an insurrection. Or they said, she's alleged to have said, quote, "Congress is the last line of defense from a stolen election," end of quote, on page 21. Isn't that quintessential political speech? Isn't that recognizing the role of Congress in certifying the electors? How could that be interpreted as an overt act to engage in insurrection or rebellion? Well, it can't be. And now, the question of voter fraud in the 2020 election is a quintessential example of political speech, legitimate political disagreements about what happened. Yeah, you know, the Supreme Court in Republican Party of Minnesota versus White, actually the first one I argued in the court, said that announcing views on disputed legal or political issues is at the core of the First Amendment. At the core. Now, this is disputed, no question. But to say that is an act of insurrection, it is a direct, overt act of insurrection against the United States. When Representative Greene was an elected member of Congress who on January 6th had a constitutional duty and responsibility to be on the floor where she was to determine whether or not electoral votes from the states were to be certified. Now, the First Amendment demands a very narrow test. I've already said and argued that engage connotes conduct. Right? But we can look to a much broader term that actually allows speech to be considered. And that is the Brandenburg case and the NAACP case, which we saw. And that is the word incitement. Now, incitement and engage are different words with different meanings. And in fact, you know that for sure because there are federal statutes that say incite and then say engage in certain conduct. I mean, they're used as different words. All right? Incitement, the Supreme Court has said, is speech, but the Supreme Court, because of First Amendment concerns, so that normal, everyday political speech will not be punished as they want to do, says that that speech must be, quote, directed to inciting or producing imminent lawless action, and that it is likely to incite or produce such action, end quote. That's on page 30 of our motion to dismiss. That is very restrictive, all right? But we know how restrictive it really is when we point out the statements that are made where people are claiming that is incitement, and the Supreme Court says, no, that's protected by the First Amendment. For instance, a Ku Klux Klan leader, quote, advocated the duty, necessity, and propriety of crime, sabotage, violence, or other unlawful methods of terrorism as a means of accomplishing industrial or political reform, end quote. And the Supreme Court said that is protected First Amendment speech. That is not incitement. There was also a statement by an NAACP official where he said, quote, if we catch any of you going in any of them racist stores, we're going to break your damn neck, end of quote. That was not incitement under the Brandenburg test. And we also have seen where a Vietnam War protester said, we are taking the street again, end of quote. And that was not incitement under the Brandenburg test. There is absolutely nothing that Representative Greene ever said that passes the Brandenburg test of incitement, and she can't even be held into account for incitement because this is engage, which requires conduct. Look, they knew what the words meant, and they chose the words that they were going to use. This was going to be a very narrow disqualification. Now, then they claim that Representative Greene promoted or organized the January 6th rally away from the Capitol, right, near the White House, and where some of the people at that rally went to the Capitol, and some of those attacked the Capitol. And I call it an attack. It was despicable for these people to do this, to attack the Capitol of the United States. So over 700 have been charged with crimes. If they are guilty, they should be convicted of those crimes. But you know, not a single one of them has been charged with engaging in insurrection or rebellion, which is a federal criminal offense. Not one. Not one of the people that actually attacked the Capitol, assaulted police officers, broke in, and were there unlawfully. Well, the First Amendment right to assemble means that the right to assemble does not lose all constitutional protections merely because some members of that group may have participated in conduct or advocated doctrine that itself is not protected. So this was a quintessentially protected First Amendment right of assembly, and that some people left and went to the Capitol, some people attacked the Capitol. You can't hold the people who organized the peaceful and constitutionally protected rally. They cannot hold that against them because that's what they did. Now, second, the challengers misstate the law regarding what is an insurrection or rebellion. They say it is, quote, to overthrow the government or obstruct its core functions, period, end quote. That's on page 32. Nowhere in any case does it say that insurrection includes obstruct its core functions. It certainly says overthrow the government, and certainly if that would occur, all of the functions would transfer to someone else, right? But they want to expand this so that, for instance, when a heckler in the House gallery stands up and heckles the Congress, the House, and they have to suspend, that person is guilty of insurrection or rebellion because a core function has been obstructed. Look, this word is way more serious and narrow than what they say. Let me give you examples of what the either statutes or the courts, etc., have said. A domestic war, that is on page 20 of our submission motion to dismiss. A domestic war. Second, and that was the Attorney General in 1867. 2, combinations too powerful to be suppressed by ordinary course of judicial proceedings or by the marshal. That was temporarily so, apparently. I don't know. But even if it were, it wasn't, it was temporary and short-lived. Third, a rising so formidable collapsed when the U.S. military showed up. And the military wasn't required here, even for the temporary attack. An armed insurrection too strong to be controlled by civil authorities. And then finally, the court in Allegheny City juxtaposed what an insurrection is and what an insurrection isn't, and what an insurrection isn't. It says an insurrection is an organized and armed uprising against authority or operation of government. It is not, while crimes growing out of mob violence, which we certainly had on January 6th, however serious they may be, or however numerous the participants, are simply unlawful acts in disturbance of the peace which do not threaten the stability of the government or the existence of political society. They're different, dramatically different. Now, we have stipulated that a group of people that did not include Representative Greene unlawfully entered the United States Capitol on January 6th. And they did. I mean, I say more than that about what happened, as I just have before your court, Your Honor, on behalf of Representative Greene.
Excuse me just a second.
Yeah.
I apologize, Mr. Bob. Mr. Hamilton,
Sorry?
that's my guy who needs to help us with the sound.
Okay.
Excuse me just a second.
I hope he helps us with the temperature. He is the man.
Thank you very much. Apologize
Thank
for the
you.
interruption.
No, that's no.
You know, if you're not we're far too old to deal with these issues. Far too old. Go ahead.
Yeah, and so we have willingly stipulated that people entered the Capitol unlawfully, and I say that more than that, more than just unlawfully. But significantly, they are willing to agree that those people that entered unlawfully did not include Representative Greene. So she did not engage on the attack on the Capitol. That, if there is conduct that meets the term engage, that if there is conduct that would ever meet the term engage, it would be breaking into the Capitol. That would be an engagement, certainly, an direct overt act. And however, I think describing that as insurrection or rebellion is just political hyperbole and not under the Constitution. And that's what you have to engage in. Now, what you will see is pertinent evidence about what she did from us from January 3rd until the end of the day on January 6th. And, you will see that on January 3rd, and we've stipulated she was sworn in, she met with President Trump about making objections to certain states' electoral votes based upon evidence that she believed and others believed constituted sufficient voter fraud to overturn the election in those particular states. You will see that on January 6th, and of all the tweets and all the videos, we are presenting this video. This is during the moment when the attack on the Capitol was occurring. And she is in the Capitol in a dark hallway, and she says, first in the tweet accompanying the video, which they do quote in their complaint, "Be safe, be smart, stay peaceful, obey the laws. This is not a time for violence. This is a time to support President Trump and support election integrity," which they believed they were doing on the floor of the United States Congress. And then the video, so I urge you to remain calm. I urge you to have a peaceful protest. Make sure that everyone is safe and protected. And let's do this in a peaceful manner. This is not a time for violence. This is a time to support President Trump, support election integrity, and support this important process that we're going through in Congress where we're allowed to object. So this is very important, so I urge you to stay calm. Be the great American people that I know you are, and just know that we're in the fight for you. God bless everyone. Be careful. Be safe. Be smart. And obey the laws. A few days later, after the attack occurred, she said, we, meaning members of Congress, did not plan, cause, and denounce the January 6th attack. And then FBI Director Wray testifies before a committee of Congress. This is R5. I was appalled, like you, he's addressing members of Congress, at the violence and destruction we saw that day. I was appalled that you, members of Congress, our country's elected leaders, were victimized right here in the very halls of Congress. Representative Greene was a victim of this attack. Her life was in danger, she thought. She was scared and confused. Her children were frantic about what was going on and feared for her safety. That is not what a person who planned the attack would react. And you will see her reaction. And you will then hear her testimony. So, the attack on the U.S. Capitol, as despicable as it was not an insurrection or rebellion, and she certainly did not engage in it as understood under the law. That is what the evidence will prove, and why she should remain, among multiple other reasons, remain on the ballot. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bob. All right. Let's start with Professor McLeod. What did I ask his name again? I'm sorry.
Maglioka.
I apologize. I struggle with names.
Your Honor, I want to start just by reading into the record the stipulated facts. It'll take a moment.
If you want to read them, that's fine. They're in. I mean, they're admitted. But you can read them.
The parties to the above captioned proceedings through their undersigned counsel stipulate that the following facts are true. That the respondent is over the age of 25. The respondent has been a United States citizen for more than 7 years. The respondent is an inhabitant of Georgia. Petitioners are all registered voters in Georgia's 14th Congressional District. On January 3, 2021, the respondent took the oath of office to be a member of the U.S. House of Representatives for the first time. A joint session of Congress was called to order at or around 1 p.m. on January 6, 2021, for the purposes of opening, counting, and resolving any objections to the Electoral College vote of the 2020 U.S. presidential election and certifying the results of the Electoral College vote. A group of people that did not include the respondent unlawfully entered the United States Capitol on January 6, 2021. On January 26, 2021, joint session of Congress was suspended while people were unlawfully inside the U.S. Capitol. Congress certified the results of the Electoral College vote at or about 3:40 a.m. on January 7, 2021, and respondent filed her candidacy for the upcoming midterm elections for Georgia's 14th Congressional District on March 7, 2022, and filed an amended notice of candidacy on March 10, 2022. We'd like to call Professor Maglioka.
Okay. Professor, you get to go here. Good morning. Raise your right hand.
Yes.
You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony given in this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Okay, please proceed. Proceed, Mr. Pine.
Good morning, Professor Maglioka. Could you just repeat your full name for the record?
Gerard Maglioka.
And what's your profession?
I am the Samuel R. Rosen Professor at the Indiana University Robert H. McKinney School of Law.
What's your educational background?
I received my college degree at Stanford and my law degree from Yale.
And could you summarize your professional experience since then?
Yes, I was a law clerk for 1 year, and then I was an associate at a law firm for 2 years, and I've been a teacher for the past 21 years.
And, Your Honor, I believe Exhibit P61, his resume has already been admitted to evidence.
That is correct.
So we don't need to retread it. Professor Maglac, what are your areas of research?
My main area of research is American constitutional history.
And you don't have a PhD in history, though, do you?
I do not.
So what is your experience working with historical materials?
Well, I do work at archives around the United States on books that I write. So, for example, I've worked at the Library of Congress, Mount Vernon, the Chicago History Museum, the National Archives, and as well as other facilities that hold documents.
And how much of your work has been original historical research using original historical materials?
Well, more than half. I mean, obviously, I use secondary sources, read other books and articles to do my research. But
Excuse me just a second. I think they're having difficulty hearing you.
oh, okay. Sorry.
Yes, you unfortunately have to talk to the stupid thing. Yes.
Did you need to finish that question?
Would you like me to repeat my answer?
Please.
Yes, I'd say I do more than half of my work on primary sources, and then the remainder consists of reading the other books or articles written about the subjects that I'm studying.
What methods do you use when you're conducting this original historical research?
Well, I use the same methods that a historian would use. So, for example, I try to identify documents and make sure they are authentic. I try to understand the documents based on what was going on at the time, and also to make sure that I'm quoting them in context rather than out of context, for example.
Have you ever heard the phrase law office history?
Yes, I have.
What do you understand that phrase to mean?
It means reaching a conclusion and then trying to find historical materials to justify the conclusion that you've already reached.
And how does your research the same or different from law office history?
Well, I don't have any particular conclusion when I begin a project. I do the research with the materials, and then I gradually reach a conclusion based on what I read and what I see.
Now, I'm not going to ask you to repeat your entire bibliography, but specifically with respect to your historical research on the 19th century, how many, if any, books have you published?
5.
And what subjects were they about?
Well, the first one was about Andrew Jackson and the period in which he was president. The second was the period at the end of the 19th century when William Jennings Bryan was running for president multiple times. The third was a biography of Congressman John Bingham, who was one of the principal framers of the 14th Amendment. The fourth is a book on the Bill of Rights that covers the entire history of the Bill of Rights, including the 19th century portion. And the one that I've just written is about George Washington's nephew, who was Bushrod Washington, who was a justice of the Supreme Court for 30 years in the early 19th century.
And in addition to these books, have you published academic articles in academic journals about 19th century constitutional history?
Yes, I've published about 10 articles that relate to 19th century constitutional history in various journals.
And in the past, let's say 3 years, have you been asked to give any academic lectures or speeches outside your university on 19th century constitutional history?
Well, of course, they were virtual because of the pandemic, but yes, I gave a talk at Mount Vernon in 2021 about the book, the Bushrod Washington book, and I've been doing some other things related to that. That's been the main source of lecture that I've done.
And have you received any fellowships or professional recognition for this work?
Yes, I was a fellow at Mount Vernon from 2019 to 2021, where I worked in the archives there on the Bushrod Washington project, looking at his letters and other correspondence that was related to my research.
And then turning to the 14th Amendment and Section 3 in particular, have you conducted any research on this?
Yes, I have.
And can you describe in broad terms that research?
Yes, in the fall of 2020, I researched and wrote a paper on Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. The paper was completed in December and made available to researchers and anyone to see on the Social Science Research Network. That happened around December 10th, 2020.
And what perspectives do you use to address questions about the 14th Amendment?
Well, primarily I look to what was said in Congress about the amendment proposal, because that's sort of, well, the most important initial source. Then I also look to secondary sources outside of Congress. For example, what did newspapers have to say about the pending proposal, what was said in the states to the extent that we can find out about the ratification of the 14th Amendment. So it's primarily looking to the discussion or conversation that Americans had about the 14th Amendment when it was proposed and under discussion for ratification.
And how are these approaches similar or different from the types of ordinary legal analysis that lawyers and judges ordinarily do?
Well, I mean, there's some overlap, of course, but I focus much more in my work on the surrounding politics or social aspects of what's going on at these particular times with these particular constitutional issues, rather than focusing more on the text or the cases. So obviously you have to do some of both, but I'm more of a historian than a lawyer in that respect.
Your Honor, at this time I move to tender Professor Magliocca as an expert witness in 19th century American constitutional history.
Mr.
I object, Your Honor. Number one, he was not tendered as an expert in the specification of witnesses. Number two, they have provided us no expert report, which is required for such an expert, so that we can prepare for his testimony. Number three, he has not produced to us the documents that he relied upon in order to reach whatever conclusions the expert report reveals. So we, under civil rules in Georgia, that's all required. None of that occurred here. And it is fundamentally unfair for us to show up at a hearing with no preparation other than his resume, which we got a couple of days ago, and cross-examine him without an adequate opportunity to prepare that is always provided for an expert witness.
As I have said before, I was unclear what the role is for the professor. He's indicated is he going to testify essentially to the contents of his article that he wrote?
No, Your Honor. The subject matter of the questioning would address matters that were not entirely embraced within the context of his law review article.
Your Honor, I apologize. I have one other comment.
Yes.
And I was going back and forth whether or not this is proper when he starts asking questions or now, but I want to raise it. What he has described is his expertise, and what he has they said he will testify about are quintessential legal questions. If a statute is vague, you look to the legislative history. That's what he wants to testify about. That's a legal question, what the legislative history is and what it provides. It is not for a person to testify about. These are about facts, about what happened on January 6th, before, and not on legal matters. This is quintessential. Legislative history is quintessentially what us lawyers do and judges decide. So I would object generally on that ground.
I'm struggling because I'm trying to, I don't know what the testimony is going to be. I mean, it's a circular question. But the issue of the history of the 14th Amendment, if the petitioners want to spend their time with a history of the enactment of the 14th Amendment, I will listen. But I concur with you that I will not permit and will not entertain testimony regarding the meaning of statutes or anything that would be properly the subject of briefing. So I will let you start, and I would also suggest, I mean, to me, this all sounds like the sort of stuff that would be coming in appropriately in the briefing. And if you have articles and authorities and original documents that you wish to cite, I'm happy to read them. But I don't know that it makes sense for us to be dealing with a series of objections on things which are historical in nature. So I will let you start, but I may stop you. Okay? And I will entertain objections when and as appropriate. Go ahead, Mr. Pine.
Thank you, Your Honor. Professor, can you just briefly summarize the historical context for Section 3 of the 14th Amendment?
Yes, so after the Civil War, elections were held across the South for Congress and for the Senate, and some of the people who won had been leaders in the Confederacy. They arrived in Washington seeking to take their seats. Northern public opinion was outraged at this because these were some of the same people who had led secession. So those members were excluded from Congress, and then consideration was given to some formal proposal that would exclude them for some period of time afterwards.
And who were the primary framers of this provision?
So Section 3 of the 14th Amendment was drafted by Senator Jacob Howard of Michigan, and it was narrower than the original proposal that had been put forward in the House of Representatives. So the House proposal for Section 3 would have prohibited all former Confederates from voting in federal elections until 1870. So the senators considered that too broad and unfair. So the substitute drafted by Senator Howard focused instead on office holding rather than voting, and did not apply to anyone who had been engaged in insurrection. Instead, it applied only to officials, either current or former, in civil or military, on the thought that it was the leaders of the insurrection who should be held accountable rather than ordinary followers.
And in developing Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, did the framers look to any historical examples of insurrections other than the Civil War?
There were other examples, but there was nothing cited specifically in the debates in Congress about that provision.
What, if any, historical insurrections were well known to reasonably educated mid-19th century Americans?
Well, there were two. One was Shays' Rebellion, which was also referred to as Shays' Insurrection, and the other was the Whiskey Rebellion, which was also referred to as the Whiskey Insurrection.
So let's start with Shays' Insurrection or Shays' Rebellion. When and where did that occur?
So Shays' Rebellion occurred in Massachusetts at the end of 1786 and early 1787. It was a tax protest by farmers who were upset about high land taxes and that had led to many foreclosures of farms. So what started happening was that groups of farmers would arm themselves and go to local courts to basically stop the courts from operating so that foreclosure sales could not happen. This built up to a point where the state militia was called in to sort of deal with this suspension of the normal operation of the courts by armed people. And that led to a clash at an armory when some of the sort of insurrectionists decided to try to take some weapons. 4 people were killed, and after that the rebellion or insurrection ended.
You said that their goal was to stop the courts from operating.
That's correct, to prevent foreclosure sales on farms.
And from a historical perspective, what were the key features of Shays' Rebellion that would be remembered in the mid-19th century by reasonably educated Americans?
Well, that it was an effort by armed people to suspend the civil authority of government for a period of time, and it was considered a significant event because it seemed to have an influence on the framers when they gathered in Philadelphia for the Constitutional Convention, because they saw it as an example of why we needed to replace the Articles of Confederation with a new constitution.
And was it considered an insurrection or a rebellion or both?
Well, so in Federalist Number 10, James Madison, the subtitle of Federalist Number 10 was "The Union as a Safeguard Against Domestic Faction and Insurrection." So, and he was referring to Shays' insurrection as well as some other upheavals that had happened in the states prior to that. And then in the 19th century, a well-known book by Justice Joseph Story referred to the insurrection in Massachusetts. Story was from Massachusetts, so it probably explains why he emphasized that point in his book.
Thank you. Let's talk about the other one you mentioned, the Whiskey Rebellion or Whiskey Insurrection. What was that?
So the whiskey insurrection was another tax protest by farmers, this time on a federal tax on whiskey and other spirits. So farmers in Pennsylvania were upset about this, and they decided to start getting armed and trying to prevent tax collection. They did this in various ways. Sometimes they would, well, in one case they tarred and feathered a tax collector. Also, they would basically attack places where the tax collectors were known to be, and they also shut down courts because, again, to some degree, the courts were necessary to further the collection of the taxes, because sometimes there were foreclosures that were required to, pay the taxes that were owed.
How many casualties were there in the Whiskey Rebellion?
There were 4 or 5 people were killed in some skirmishes. Eventually, George Washington called in a large force, more than 10,000 troops, to go into that portion of Pennsylvania, and basically, for the most part, the insurrection just ended because of the sight of this large force led by George Washington, but 4 or 5 people were killed.
How well organized was the Whiskey Rebellion?
Well, it was a loosely organized thing. There were mostly local groups doing different things, so there wasn't really a single leader at all that we know of.
And by the time of the 1860s, how well known was the Whiskey Rebellion to ordinary, educated 19th century Americans?
It would have been very...
I object. We're now beyond even legislative history. He's already conceded that in the debates, they were talking about the Civil War, not what these were colloquially called insurrections, not the legal definition under
Sustained.
Section 2.
Next question.
Your Honor. If I recall your earlier testimony correctly, you said that 4 people died in Shays' Rebellion and 4 or 5 in the Whiskey Rebellion. Am I
I object. I mean, he's going on with this is to talk about something that was relevant as even legislative history regarding Title III. These were never cited.
Overruled. Go ahead.
Did I have those numbers right? That you said 4 or 5 people died in each of those insurrections?
Correct.
So, to the extent that 19th century Americans thought of these as insurrections, in addition to, of course, the Civil War, how would 19th century Americans have understood what level of violence or bloodshed was needed before the word insurrection would be used?
Well, some violence was required, because there was no thought really that you could have a peaceful protest and that would be considered an insurrection, but there was no particular thought about how much violence was required.
And how would they distinguish between, or would they distinguish between a riot versus an insurrection?
I object. He's going
Sustained.
into mind reading.
Sustained. Next.
All right. What sources did 19th century Americans use to understand the meanings of words?
I object. No foundations relating to that question.
Sustained.
All right. Give me your phrase. Your Honor, I'd like to display an exhibit that's already been admitted into evidence, which is P81.
P81. Okay. Bear with me.
Look at the, one more page after that one. Can you see that, Professor Magliocco?
Yes, I can.
What are we looking at?
You were looking at an 1830 edition of Webster's Dictionary.
How is that dictionary used in 1830 and afterwards?
Well, it was the leading dictionary in the United States during this period.
Well,
And-
excuse me, what period are we talking about?
1830.
Okay, 1830, okay.
Was the dictionary updated on a semi-regular or regular basis after that?
Yes, much like modern dictionaries, they would do a new edition every so many years.
But this is the 1830 edition.
Yes.
And you're familiar with this dictionary, you've seen it before.
Yes, I am.
To what extent does it inform, if at all, your understanding of how words were used in the mid-19th century?
I object.
Sustained.
Let's turn to the next page. And if we could zoom in on the left column in the top. Can you read that, Professor Margarie? It's a little dicey.
Oh boy, okay.
Can you zoom in even more there?
I will do my best. Okay.
Can you?
Yes, I think I can.
Can you read a couple entries down? And I'm not going to ask you to read it aloud, but do you see there? Can you read the definitions there?
Yes, I can.
Are you familiar with if this dictionary has a definition for insurrection?
Yes, it does.
And what can you, without reading from that definition, is that, in your experience as a historian, is that typical of a 19th century understanding of the word insurrection?
Sustained, sustained. You don't even stand up. Document speaks for itself, counsel. Next.
Fair enough, Your Honor. How do you use these dictionaries in your own work?
Well, they're helpful in putting terms into context. For example, if I'm reading a letter and I'm trying to understand what somebody meant, sometimes the definition that people used back then isn't the same as the definition that we use now. So it's you have to check.
Right. Let's go to Exhibit P80, if we may. This has also been admitted into evidence.
P80.
Yes. And what are we looking at here?
This is a statute, Georgia statute, enacted in 1866.
And why did what is the statute about?
Insurrection.
And do you know why Georgia enacted this statute?
I believe it was because of it was in response, basically, to what had occurred during the Civil War.
And Your Honor, I haven't asked the question yet.
I haven't objected yet.
You may ask your question, counsel.
But maybe I should just stand.
I'm sorry, this is very serious stuff, but what concerns me, Mr. Fine, is this is what I would expect to be reading in briefs. This is not what I expect to hear testimony on. This is historical data that can be reviewed and commented on and proffered and so forth. I'm indulging you because of the importance of this hearing, but you may ask the question, and I will, if I hear an objection, I'll rule. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, may I briefly confirm?
Sure, sure. In fact, we're actually past my 10:45 break, so let's take our break. We'll reconvene. No, stop that. This is not a show. Do not do that. We will stop now. We'll reconvene at 11 o'clock. Thank you.
Yes, I know. It's just sometimes I'm not sure like how close you're supposed to get. It's okay now. I'm fine. Yeah, but careful.
So this court hearing challenging Georgia Republican Representative Margarie Taylor Greene's candidacy for re-election, as you heard, taking a brief break here. We're expecting them back at 11 o'clock Eastern. Our live coverage will continue when the hearing resumes here live on C-SPAN. While we wait, we'll show you some of the hearing from earlier today.
You doing it, Val?
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court.
Yes, sir.
Ron Fine on behalf of the voters in Georgia's 14th Congressional District who filed this challenge. With me, of course, are Andrew Celli, Sam Shapiro, Diamond Wells, Brian Sells, and of course our co-counsel watching remotely. Your Honor, this is a solemn occasion. This is not politics. This is not theater. This is a serious case that the voters who we represent have brought in order to offer proof that their United States representative seeking re-election, Margarie Taylor Greene, having taken the oath to support the Constitution, then broke that oath and engaged in insurrection. And in order to understand that case, it's important to set the stage with some history. There have been past insurrections in this country, and we're going to hear about some of them. The most important of which was the Civil War, or as it was called at the time, the insurrection. And Professor Gerard Magliocca, who is one of the nation's foremost constitutional historians of that era, specializing in Reconstruction and the 14th Amendment, will talk about some of that history. What was interesting about some of the differences between these past insurrections is that the Civil War involved states raising armies. They equipped them with uniforms, insignia, state-of-the-art military equipment. They marched in columns. They occupied huge tracts of land. That is not the only type of insurrection that this country has seen. Professor Magliocca will also talk about some of the previous insurrections that were on the minds of 19th century Americans. Those include Shays' Rebellion, also known as Shays' Insurrection, and the Whiskey Rebellion. These insurrections were of a different character. They were not quite as organized as the Civil War. The foot soldiers of those insurrections didn't march in armies. They didn't conquer vast swaths of territory, and they certainly didn't wear uniforms. That is the kind of insurrection that occurred on January 6th. The evidence will show a violent assault on the United States Capitol that the law enforcement and ordinary authorities were unable to control, that this violent assault had multiple purposes. Those included capturing and executing the Speaker of the House of the United States Representatives, the Vice President of the United States, and other members of Congress. Those purposes also included, and for a time achieved, preventing the certification of the electoral votes for the president incoming, Joseph R. Biden, and the disruption of the peaceful transfer of power. This attack on the sacred temple of our democracy, the United States Capitol, was unprecedented. And to be sure, it was less organized than some of those past insurrections. This was not a case where the leaders were on horseback leading the charge. This was not the type of insurrection where the leaders were standing in Richmond, Virginia, giving long-winded speeches to justify the mayhem. Rather, the leaders of this insurrection, of whom there were a number, were among us, on Facebook, on Twitter, on corners of social media that would make your stomach curl. The evidence will show that Margarie Taylor Greene was one of them. In order to understand that, January 6th has to be set in context. It didn't arise out of nowhere. Even before January 6th, as December 2020 turned into January of 2021, there were multiple shifting tactics used by different groups, some violent extremist groups, some nonviolent groups, all loosely coordinating, all with a shared central aim of preventing the certification of Joseph Biden as president, the tactics shifted. The different leaders jockeyed for position. Some were in violent extremist groups, some were elected officials, some were influencers of various types. You'll hear about them. You'll hear about these different figures, some of whom isolated themselves from some of the action with layers of deniability, some more plausible than others. There'll be direct evidence. There'll also be inferential evidence. And that inferential evidence includes coded language. Let me explain what I mean by that. The evidence today does not include surveillance tapes purporting to show that Margarie Taylor Greene was directing the plotting of the attack. That's not going to happen today. The witness list today does not include a turncoat witness who's going to come and risk their own exposure by testifying that he or she was ordered by Margarie Taylor Greene to take certain actions in secret. That's not the type of evidence that we are going to present today. Rather, the way that insurrections are organized nowadays is less in uniforms with military hierarchies and chains of command, less with detailed military plans of battle, and more through social media and the mass media. That's the era that we're living in. In many cases, the communications have multiple layers. And anyone who knows a teenager, is a teenager, or knows anyone in their 20s knows that hashtags and memes and ways of communicating among internet subcultures can mean that words that could have one meaning, a benign meaning or even a baffling meaning to large portions of the American public, can carry a very different significance to the people swimming in that particular subculture. So the most important witness today, after Professor Margarie testifies, the most powerful witness against Margarie Taylor Greene's candidacy, the most powerful witness in establishing that she crossed the line into engagement of insurrection, is Margarie Taylor Greene herself. You'll hear her words, of course, on the stand, what she says and what she doesn't say. You'll also hear what she said in the past. Again, some of that will be in somewhat coded or veiled language, but you'll also hear, in some cases, the mask falls, and she shows us exactly what she intended. Now, she was not on the Capitol steps urging the surrender.
Well, there were temporary civil governments put in place by President Johnson, but then in 1867, Congress passed the Military Reconstruction Acts to impose essentially martial law on almost the entire former Confederacy.
So, for example, who was governing Virginia during that period?
A Union Army general.
Okay. And when was the 14th Amendment, Section 3, first implemented?
So it was first implemented in the Military Reconstruction Acts because those acts said that there had to be new elections throughout the South to elect conventions that could ratify the 14th Amendment and write new state constitutions. And so the acts provided that people who were covered by what it described as Section 3 of the pending amendment were not going to be able to vote in the elections for those conventions. And then there had to be some means of determining whether people could or could not vote under that standard.
Okay. Can we please put up Exhibit P48, which has been admitted into evidence already? And Don, if you could zoom into the upper left so we can see it. Professor Margarie, I know this is small print, but can you see what that is?
Yes, this is an opinion of Attorney General Stanberry interpreting the First and Second Military Reconstruction Acts.
And when was that issued?
This opinion is May 1867.
When was the 14th Amendment ratified?
In 1868.
And where was this printed?
This was in the New York Times. It would have been widely reprinted in newspapers across the country.
Okay, great. We can put that down. How widely was Section 3 applied in the years after the ratification of the 14th Amendment?
Well, between 1868 and 1872, it was implemented many times, mostly to remove state and local officials who had been part of the Confederacy, but also in a couple instances to exclude people from office.
And what led to it not being implemented as much?
So in 1872, Congress exercised its power under Section 3 to grant an amnesty to many of the former Confederates. Basically, in part, that was because there had been private bills that had been giving amnesty to individuals, but largely that was simply, did you know a member of Congress? And then, if you did, they would pass a bill for you.
Your Honor, I moved to strike his first statement. It was a legal opinion, and that is whether the Amnesty Act of 1872 gave amnesty to former only, if you will, former officers. It's a legal question.
I understand you raised the issue. I'm going to let it stand. But thank you. I mean, I understand the point. Believe me, I understand the point.
What did the debates around amnesty in public and in the streets or in Congress center on?
Well, the question was,
Wait a minute. There's a lack of foundation.
Fair enough. Okay. All right.
We've got to have a little foundation.
All right. How familiar are you with the debates that led to the 1872 Amnesty Act?
I'm quite familiar with them. I read all of them.
And what did they focus on?
Well, they focused on whether people deserved amnesty, first of all, and second, if so, who should be excluded from that. And basically, would it be good for sectional reconciliation or not? Those are the big questions.
And how much of those debates centered around ex-Confederates as compared to anyone else who might become subject to Section 3?
Well, it was basically about ex-Confederates because those were the people who were petitioning Congress for amnesty.
Great. Just a few more questions. During the Civil War itself, how did Washington, D.C. fare?
Well, it was a fortified city, and for good reason, because there was a Confederate attack by Jubal Early on the Capitol in 1864 that was repulsed at Fort Monroe.
And were there, or how many, if any, presidential elections occurred during the Civil War?
One in 1864.
How orderly was that, if you know?
It was very orderly.
And how did the counting of the electoral votes proceed?
There was no problem with it at all.
When, if ever, did the Confederate insurrectionists seize control of the United States Capitol?
They did not.
And in your opinion, if in 1864 or 1868 a violent mass of people had seized control of the U.S. Capitol during certification of presidential electoral votes and disrupted the peaceful transfer of power, would 19th century Americans have understood that?
You stop that question. Next.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions.
Anything, Mr. Bob?
No, Your Honor, not other than to welcome a fellow Hoosier. And
The thought crossed my mind.
yeah,
Mine did.
and I was a history major, so maybe I can sort myself in.
Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you.
Step down.
Your Honor, the petitioners call Margarie Taylor Greene to the stand.
Representative Greene, could you come here, please, ma'am? Raise your hand, please. You solemnly swear to affirm the testimony bringing this here is the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Please be seated. Mr. Shelley, go ahead.
May I proceed? Thank you. Good morning, Representative Greene. I'm Andy Shelley. I represent the plaintiffs in this matter. Ms. Greene, you were elected to Congress in November of 2020, right?
Yes.
And you became a member of Congress on January 3rd, 2021. Is that correct?
Yes.
And when you became a member of Congress, you became a member of Congress by virtue of having taken an oath of office, right?
I became a member of Congress by being elected by the people of the 14th District.
Okay, but you actually were permitted to take your seat in the House of Representatives because you took an oath of office. Isn't that correct?
I swore an oath on January 3rd.
And that oath required you to swear that you would support and defend the Constitution of the United States, right?
Yes.
And it required you to swear an oath that you would support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, right?
Yes.
And part of the oath that you took says that you were going to undertake that obligation to defend the Constitution against all enemies freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion. Do you recall that part?
I think so.
Okay, well, let's have a look at it. This will be Plaintiff's Exhibit 63. I just want to make sure you get a chance to see it.
This is the excerpt from the congressional record.
No, Your Honor. This is
Which one?
This is Exhibit PX 63.
Okay.
This is a federal statute, 5 USC 3331, which sets forth the oath of office for federal officers, including members of Congress. And Ms. Wells, if you could make that a little bit bigger, I want to make sure the representative can see it. The highlighted portion, please. So if you see about a third of the way, 2/3 of the way down, it says that I will take this obligation. I take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion. See that? And you now recall that was part of the oath, right?
Yes.
And what did that mean to you, Congresswoman Greene?
About taking it freely without reservation?
Yes.
It means I'm swearing the oath and I have no reservation.
Great. Now, one part of the Constitution, Representative Greene, is the 12th Amendment, right?
Yes.
You're familiar with the 12th Amendment?
Yes.
That's the one that provides for the constitutional process for counting electoral votes in a presidential election, right?
Your Honor, I object. Under the speech and debate clause, she cannot be questioned about what she does on the floor of Congress pursuant to her legislative responsibility.
And I don't intend to ask any question of that sort, Your Honor. I just want to have her understanding of the Constitution. This is a case about Representative Greene's state of mind, including her understanding of the oath and the Constitution.
Then I further object because this case is not about her state of mind. It's whether or not she engaged in insurrection or rebellion. Engaged connotes conduct.
I concur.
And a
So
direct.
sustained. Next question.
Ms. Greene, if somebody tried to unlawfully interfere with the process of counting the electoral votes, unlawfully, that person would be an enemy of the Constitution. Wouldn't you agree?
Does it define that way? Is it defined that way?
Well, I'm asking for your understanding. If somebody broke the law in a way designed to interfere with the process of counting the electoral college votes, that person would be an enemy of the Constitution.
You mean interrupting Congress? Is that what you're referring to?
Doing anything unlawfully to interfere with the process of counting the electoral votes.
Interrupting Congress, like when the Democrats interrupted Congress and had a sit-in on the House floor and stopped Congress?
Excuse me, Representative Greene.
Yes.
Could you rephrase your question?
I'm entitled to ask my questions in the way I'd like to ask them, Your Honor. I ask that you listen to my question and simply respond. May I proceed?
Yes.
So if someone broke the law in an effort to interfere with the counting of the electoral votes, that person would be an enemy of the Constitution. Am I right about that?
Breaking the law is unlawful. There's been over 700 people charged for what happened on January 6th.
Right. And those people were trying to interfere with the lawful process of counting the votes for the Electoral College, right?
I would assume, yes, they did. They stopped
Okay.
the electoral count, yes.
Right. And so those people would be enemies of the Constitution. You would agree with that, right?
I don't know if it defines it that way.
Well, having taken the oath that we saw on the screen, if you were aware that someone was going to unlawfully interfere with the constitutional process of counting the electoral votes, you'd be obliged by your oath to try to stop them, right?
Your Honor, I object. The claim is not she violated her oath. The claim is under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And so her opinion on words like enemies are words of art often in the law is just irrelevant to the matter, to whether or not she engaged did a direct and overt act of insurrection.
Your Honor, we had a 1-hour presentation on the law from Mr. Bopp. We did not object to that.
I will let you answer the question. I've forgotten what it is. Could you repeat it?
Can we ask for it to be read back?
Question: if you were aware that somebody was going to unlawfully interfere with the constitutional process of counting electoral votes, you would be obliged to have them arrested or stopped, right?
You may answer.
You may answer the question to the best of your ability.
I had no knowledge of any attempt, and so that's a question that I can't answer.
Well,
I can't answer that question.
I take your representation that you had no knowledge for the time being. I'm asking it as a hypothetical question, just to understand
I
your...
can't answer a hypothetical question.
Well, I'm permitted to ask you one, so I'm going to ask you again. If you had knowledge in advance that someone was going to unlawfully interfere with the counting of the electoral votes in a presidential election, under your oath, you'd be obliged to do something to stop that, right?
I object. She's not being charged for violating her oath. There is no foundation laid that she had any knowledge about anything like that.
We'll come to that.
And so these hypothetical...
Sustain.
Let me try it a different way, Ms. Greene. You remember the part in the oath where you talked about taking on the obligations of the oath freely and without mental reservation or purpose of evasion? You recall that from a few minutes ago, right?
Yes.
Okay. If you knew that people were planning to interfere with the constitutional process of counting the electoral votes, you knew that before you took the oath, and you took the oath anyway, and decided not to do anything about those plans, that would be a mental reservation. Don't you agree?
I object. She is not being charged with violating the oath. The question is, did she engage in insurrection or rebellion?
Her state of mind is relevant, Your Honor. We think it's very important to have her understanding.
What, Mr. Chair?
It's relevant to whether she engaged in insurrection during the time period from January 3rd to January 6th. And we're going to be talking about her state of mind all day.
You may come back to that question after you have laid a foundation for why it ties into her activities from and after the...
Fair enough. Fair enough, Your Honor. Ms. Greene, you're familiar with social media, right?
Yes.
And that's a form of communication, right?
Yes.
You know what Facebook is and Twitter, right?
Yes.
You use those as an important form of communication in your work.
Yes.
You post messages on Facebook, right?
I post statements, messages, yes.
Videos also, right?
Yes.
And you also respond and react to other people's comments when they're posted on Facebook or Twitter, right?
Yes.
And you do that as a way to get your political views out into the world.
It's my freedom of speech to do so.
I agree. And you've been very successful at using social media to get your views out into the world, right?
I would say that's an opinion.
Well, I'm asking your opinion. You've got hundreds of thousands of people who follow you on Twitter and Facebook, right?
No, not really, because my personal Twitter account doesn't exist anymore.
Before it was suspended by Twitter, you had hundreds of thousands of people following you on Facebook and Twitter, right?
Yes.
And by the way, the way Facebook and Twitter work, is my understanding, is they don't have to necessarily follow you to read what you have to say, right?
I guess so.
So it could be millions of people who have read the things that you have said on Facebook and Twitter over the years.
I don't know that.
But it could be. You would agree with that, right?
No, I don't know that.
Okay.
I don't know how many people read or see what I post on social media.
But what you post on social media is what you want people to know about your political beliefs, correct?
Sure.
Okay. You're not putting stuff up there as a joke, are you?
Sometimes, yes.
Well, we'll come back to that. And you use Facebook and Twitter to communicate with your constituents in the 14th congressional district here in Georgia, right?
Yes.
So, immediately after the 2020 election, and through January 6th, and even beyond that, you issued a number of tweets and made statements on Twitter and Facebook about the election, right?
Yes.
You tweeted a whole lot of material about your views of what happened in the 2020 election.
Yes.
And the thrust of those tweets were that you felt that the election was stolen from the sitting president.
I object. That is,
You can ask the question, what is your opinion?
What is, well, I also want to ask whether she communicated that opinion through. Well, let's do it that way, Your Honor. I take your point.
Where are you going with this, counsel?
I'm going to show the witness a number of her tweets, and I wanted to make sure that I understand the context of them. That's all.
Well, she said she posts on Twitter.
Right. And my question is whether she posts material that reflect the opinion that you have. Strike that. Ms. Greene, you had the opinion between November 2020, when the election happened, and January 6th, 2021, that the election was stolen from President Trump.
I object.
Am I right about that?
Ask her if you've got questions about specific documents or
Okay.
specific things. Go ahead. Let's not bandy around.
Let's go to PX 2A, Ms. Wells, please.
I'm sorry. Which one is this?
2A, Your Honor. Can you see that, Ms. Greene?
Mm-hmm.
And what we have here in 2A is a document. Well, I'll ask you, can you tell us, is this a statement that you posted on Twitter on December 3rd, 2020?
Go ahead.
Sure.
I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am?
Yes.
Yeah. And this is a statement where you talk about that you were looking for a senator to join yourself and Representative Mo Brooks to reject the fraudulent votes for Joe Biden and to keep the real Donald Trump in the White House, right?
I object, Your Honor, to the. You can hear my objection.
I'm waiting. I'm waiting with bated breath, Jim.
All right. This violates her right of free speech. There's nothing in this statement that meets the Brandenburg test, even if speech could be considered, since it can't when we're dealing with engages, which is conduct, not speech. And it does not even meet the incitement test, which requires directed to inciting or producing imminent lawless action.
Your Honor, we heard an hour of argument this morning on this.
Hold on. Go ahead, Mr. Bob.
Thank you, Your Honor. That is likely to incite or produce action in the quote. So it's objectionable. And to call her into account for her First Amendment free speech is unconstitutional.
Mr.
and
Bob, I
irrelevant.
appreciate your argument, but that's argument. I'm going to allow the question. Go ahead, Mr. Shelley.
When you sent out this, strike that, did you send out this tweet, Ms. Greene? Ms. Wells, could you put it back up?
Yes.
Okay. And when you sent out this tweet, you wanted the people who read the tweet to know that it was your view that the votes for Mr. Biden for president were fraudulent, or some of them were, right?
That really wasn't the purpose of that tweet.
I'm just asking whether when you sent this, you were communicating to your the people who read your Twitter account that you believed that there were fraudulent votes for Mr. Biden and that your goal was to keep President Trump in the White House.
I was communicating that we were looking for a senator to join our objection, which is very much part of the responsibilities and duties that I can do as a member of Congress.
I agree with that, but the purpose of that was because you believed that the votes for Mr. Biden were fraudulent, right? Or at least some of them.
We had been spending a vast amount of time reading and researching and talking to people, and had seen tremendous evidence of voter fraud. I don't know if you're aware, because I know you're not from Georgia. We currently have, our Secretary of State has an
Your Honor,
investigation
I would move
going
to
on
strike this.
into
I'm
election
entitled to
fraud
get
right
answers to
now.
my questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Greene. All right, let's back up.
By the way, Your Honor, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we missed something very important. Can the representative be sworn?
Oh, thank you. No, I swore in. She
Oh, you
swore
did?
in.
Oh, okay, I didn't see that. I'm
I
sorry.
thought I forgot. Sorry, thank you.
All right.
Yeah, no, she's
And can I ask the court to acknowledge that this is an adverse witness, a hostile
I
witness?
acknowledge that she's an adverse witness, and you
And-
may therefore cross-examine.
Right.
Even
And-
though it's only your case in chief. Yes, I acknowledge that.
And I would ask the court to remind the witness that in this posture, she has to answer my questions. She can't give speeches. Is that
Well,
fair?
You're entitled to an answer to the question that is asked. but
She's
you're not
also entitled to
make-
explain her answer.
You're not entitled to answers that are, to require her to answer when the question is objectionable, violates her First Amendment rights, is irrelevant to the charges that are being made, just to what? Fishing expedition, political theater, what is this?
This is cross-examination.
No, this is cross-examination.
I'm entitled to a
Let's-
yes,
let's-
no, or I can't answer response.
Let's go ahead. Go ahead.
Unless this is objectionable.
You have a standing objection, Mr. Bob, to everything in the world. I want to question your witness. Let her
Okay,
testify.
no, my-
wait a minute.
She's
wait a
doing
minute,
fine.
Wait a minute.
You-
That's
you're
enough.
instructing me-
Stop. Mr. Bob, please sit down. Next question, Mr. Chairman. This is not theater. This is not an argument from the Supreme Court. This is an evidentiary hearing. So let's get going. Go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Wells, can you pull up Plaintiff's Exhibit 2C, please?
So which number?
2C. Ms. Greene, is this a tweet that you sent out from your account on December 19th, 2020?
Yes.
And in this tweet, let me go back a second. Your Honor, I would just ask that the previous exhibit, which I think was 2D, be admitted into evidence.
What was the number?
2D.
2A.
I'm sorry, 2A.
All right, so 2A is in. Yes, I'll admit it.
And I'd ask that 2C be admitted into evidence.
2C. All right, say that again. I was distracted. Go through it again.
Sure. I asked the witness if this was her tweet. She said it was.
This is your tweet. Okay.
And I ask it be admitted into evidence.
I object. It's not probative. It violates her First Amendment rights.
Well,
It has nothing to do with engage. It doesn't, it's before January 3rd.
it's in for what it's worth, Mr. Bob.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know if it's worth anything, but it's in. Go ahead.
And I apologize, Your Honor.
It's okay.
I do think it's my responsibility to make pertinent objections.
I respect it, Mr. Bob. I respect it. Go ahead. Go ahead, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you. Representative Greene, in your tweet on December 19th, 2020, that we've marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 2C, one of the things you're communicating to the people who would read this tweet was that you want them to come to Washington on January 6th for a demonstration. Is that right?
For a march for Trump.
Right. Fight for Trump. The phrase that you use there is hashtag fight for Trump, right? That's what the words say.
That's what it says on my tweet.
Okay. And you posted that because you, in fact, wanted people to show up on January 6th, 2021 in D.C. in order to help you stop the theft of the 2020 election from your point of view?
No.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure we got a clear answer on this. You did believe at this time that the 2020 election had been stolen by the Democrats from Mr. Trump, right?
I was asking people to come for a peaceful march, which is what everyone is entitled to do under their First Amendment, but I was not asking them to actively engage in violence or any type of action.
My question is really simple. It's about your opinion. When this tweet came out and in this period, it was your opinion that the election had been stolen from Mr. Trump or was about to be stolen, right?
Under my opinion, there was a tremendous amount of fraudulent things that happened in the election, and under my opinion, I want to do anything I can to protect election integrity and to protect the people of my district in Georgia, people's votes. They should count.
Is it fair to say, Representative Greene, that from election night of 2020 until January 6, 2021, your personal opinion and your wish was that Congress not certify Joe Biden as the winner of the 2020 election?
No, that's not accurate.
You believed that Joe Biden had lost the election to Mr. Trump, right?
Well, yes, we saw a tremendous amount of voter fraud. We have investigations going on right now in the state of Georgia. There's investigations going on in multiple states. My own husband showed up to vote in the general election, and when he went in to vote in person, he was told that he had already voted by absentee ballot, when in fact he had never even requested an absentee ballot. There's many instances.
Oh, Your Honor, I didn't see the congresswoman get sworn in. I didn't see it.
Well, unfortunately, some technical issues here with this Georgia court hearing challenging Georgia Republican Congresswoman Margarie Taylor Greene's candidacy for re-election. A group of voters in her congressional district filed the challenge, citing a provision in the 14th Amendment of the Constitution preventing members of Congress from running again if they take part in an insurrection or rebellion against the government. Congresswoman Greene, as you saw, in the midst of testifying. The court here taking a break as they try to iron out some of the problems with the equipment there. We will also take a break here. We'll resume our live coverage in just a couple of minutes, and we'll right now show you some of the testimony, some of the opening statements from earlier in this case.
They start off in misstating the law by
Representative Greene, I think we're ready. Come on back up. Everybody ready? We good? Okay. We're back on the record. We appreciate your patience, your disruption. Appreciate everybody's cooperation while they dealt with technology, one of the veins of human existence. All right.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Shelley, thank you.
Your Honor, I would just ask that Mr. Bob not consult with his client in the break period while I'm examining her. That's generally not permitted, in my experience.
Go ahead.
Can we see Plaintiff's Exhibit 2C, please, Ms. Wells.
So we're on 2C.
2C. Ms. Greene, this is the tweet that we talked about a little bit earlier. Just a quick question on it. You issued this on December 19th, 2020, correct?
I can't see real well, but I think that's the date.
Maybe we can make it a little larger.
That's what it says.
And what you were doing in this tweet was you were tweeting out a story from the Epoch Times about President Trump saying that the protests that were planned for January 6th were going to be, quote, wild, right?
I object. We don't have the, where's the article?
Right there under the picture of President Trump.
Does it quote that?
Yes, it says Trump, supporters should join wild protest in D.C. on Jan 6th.
Okay, I withdraw my objection. I can't see that. I can't
If we
see
could make it a
that.
little larger, Ms. Wells? You can answer the question, Representative Greene.
What was your question?
My question is, what you were doing in this tweet is you were tweeting out a story from the Epoch Times about President Trump making a statement that the protest on January 6th would be wild, right?
I tweeted an article that had the details of the dates and times.
Right, and also included President Trump's statements that he expected the demonstrations on January 6th to be wild, right?
I don't think that's what my tweet was about.
Okay, well, but you see that the article says Trump, supporters should join, quote, wild protests in D.C. on Jan 6th.
I don't remember tweeting that specifically for what you're saying. Those are your words.
No,
Those aren't mine.
I'm actually reading from what's on the...
You're speculating on why I tweeted that, but I don't remember tweeting it for that specific reason.
Ms. Greene, I'm just asking questions.
I'm just answering.
And in your tweet, you mentioned earlier that your words, join hashtag March for Trump in D.C. on January 6th to fight for Trump, that you were urging people to come to Washington for a peaceful demonstration, right?
Peaceful demonstration,
Right.
absolutely.
Yeah, that word peaceful is nowhere in this tweet, right? Have a look. That word peaceful is not in this tweet.
I can't read it. There's only half of it there.
Let's give the representative a paper copy of that one. Just want to make sure I'm
No,
not
I
missing.
can see it now. It was scrolled up just a second ago.
Okay, peaceful's not in there, is it?
Well, you know, like,
Is the word peaceful in there, Ms. Greene?
it does not say peaceful right
That's my
there.
question.
But
Thank you.
you're asking me, and I said for peaceful demonstration, just like people have the right to do in their First Amendment.
I'm asking, there's not a secret code in there that it's supposed to be peaceful, right?
Well, I never mean anything for violence. I don't support violence of any kind, and I've said it over and over again. So I'm telling you.
You just
that
didn't say it on this occasion, did you?
I never mean anything for violence. All of my words never, ever mean anything for violence.
We'll examine that question. Go to Plaintiff's Exhibit 2F, please.
2F
F?
is in Frank.
Yes. And I'm looking at this top half of the exhibit. Ms. Greene, this is a tweet that you sent out on January 2nd, 2021, correct?
I'm not sure.
Okay, you don't recall this?
I don't recall tweeting that, no.
Okay. You can set that to one side. Well, let me ask this question. Does anybody tweet things on your Twitter account? Strike that. Did anybody in January of 2021 tweet things on your Twitter account without your permission?
On what day?
Any time from November of 2020 to January 6th.
I don't remember. That's difficult to answer.
Okay. You'd be surprised if somebody got into your Twitter account and tweeted something without your permission, wouldn't you?
Well, no one tweeted anything without my permission. I just don't remember who tweeted what.
Fair enough. Now, Would you agree, Ms. Greene, that this tweet from January 2nd, 2021 is something that we can fairly attribute to you, being that it was tweeted on your Twitter account?
I'm sorry, I don't know.
Okay. You can take that down. Ms. Greene, you've had your disagreements with Speaker Pelosi, isn't that right?
I'm not sure what you mean.
You've had political disagreements with her. You don't agree with some of the things she's done in her career, right?
Politically speaking, that would be correct.
Right. You don't agree with a lot of things she's done, right?
Politically speaking, that would be correct.
In fact, you think that Speaker Pelosi is a traitor to the country, right?
I'm not answering that question. It's speculation. It's hypothetical.
You've said that, haven't you, Ms. Greene, that she's a traitor to the country?
No, I haven't said that.
Okay. Put up Plaintiff's Exhibit 5, please.
Oh, no, wait. Hold on now. I believe by not upholding the, securing the border, that violates her oath of office.
Fair enough. I'm not interested in her oath of office. I'm interested in that you said that she's a traitor to our country, right?
I object, Your Honor. She is not. This is.
I don't see the relevance of that, Mr. Shelley. Next.
Your Honor, can we give Mr. Bopp a standing objection on the First Amendment grounds?
No.
Because this is an effort to interrupt my examination of the witness. I am attempting to establish the witness's desire to engage in insurrection during the period January 3rd to January 6th. Now, it's true that some of the things that she said are relevant even though they occurred before January 3rd. But there's no First Amendment objection to evidence, Your Honor. She said what she said.
There is First Amendment objection.
We don't agree.
Well, fine, but I get to make my objection.
You can make the objection. You can have a standing objection.
I don't want a standing objection.
Because he wants to interrupt my flow, Your Honor. That's not appropriate.
I don't object to everything.
Okay.
Okay? I have specific things that I think I object to, and I should be extended the courtesy to do that.
You may object. But,
Plaintiff's Exhibit 5, please.
well, 5 now. 5. Okay.
So I'm placing before you what we pre-marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 5, which is an article that appeared in CNN on January 26th, 2021.
A hard copy of this available?
Should be in the book.
I mean, does she have a hard copy? I mean, she can't read it off the screen.
We have one for her.
Good. Let's start using hard copies. You can't read stuff like this off screen.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes, sir, you may. You have a standing permission to approach the witness to deliver copies of documents as to which you're going to ask your question.
Thank you. Ms. Wells, if you could scroll down a bit. One second. Ms. Greene, I want to direct your attention to the bottom of the 4th page of the exhibit. Mm-hmm. This is a paragraph that starts out, "She's a traitor to our country." Do you see that?
I object, Your Honor. What possible relevance could it be that she had political disagreements that resulted in hyperbole that is commonly used?
Your Honor, this is an argument.
Overruled. Next.
Thank you. I just want to ask a narrow question, Representative Greene. Did you say, referring to Speaker Pelosi, she's a traitor to our country, she's guilty of treason, she took an oath to protect the American citizens, she gives aid and comfort to our enemies who illegally invade our land, that's what treason is, and our law representatives and senators can be kicked out and no longer serve in our government, and it's a crime punishable by death is what treason is. Nancy Pelosi is guilty of treason. Did you say those words?
I said, this is what I was telling you, is she doesn't uphold our laws.
It's a
She
simple
allows
yes or no
illegal-
question, ma'am.
I mean,
Did you say those words?
Without being instructed by him to say yes or no.
I don't agree, Your Honor. This is cross-examination. She's
So
entitled
what?
to an answer to my question, not a
Representative
speech.
Greene, did you say these words that are quoted on the bottom of it? Did you say that?
According to the CNN article I did, I don't
Do
remember.
you recall saying?
I don't recall saying all of this, but I do recall having said this about I totally disagree with the border issues.
Okay,
and I
ask and
believe-
answer. Next question.
Okay.
And Representative Greene, you have advocated the use of physical violence against people you disagree with politically, right?
I object without context, without anything.
Overruled. Go ahead. What's the question again, Mr.
You've advocated the use of physical violence against people that you disagree with politically.
That's a question.
Yes.
Is that true?
I don't think so. I don't know how to answer that.
Next question.
Well, have a look at what we've marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 5.
P5.
P5.
Thank you. That's the same one.
Same one.
Correct me. Okay,
Right.
thank you. You've got a copy of this, Representative?
Oh, is it the
Yes,
same
the
one?
same.
Okay.
And, well, let me ask a foundational question. You understand that on social media posts like Facebook and Twitter, one of the things, well, I guess on Facebook, one of the things you can do is you can like someone's post, right?
You can like people's posts.
Right. And when you like someone's post, that's a way of signifying that you agree with or admire or think it's correct, that the post is correct, right?
I don't know. I don't agree with your phrase of questioning.
Well, I'm asking you. Isn't it true that when you personally, Ms. Greene, like someone's post, you're signifying your approval for what the post said?
No, I don't agree with how you're phrasing that question. No, I don't agree with that.
So it's true, though, that you liked a post that suggested that, quote, a bullet to the head of Nancy Pelosi would be a quicker way to remove her as Speaker of the House than impeachment, right?
Now, you're using a CNN article, which CNN has lied about me multiple times, and you're using a CNN article.
I'm
as
asking
your
you to answer my
evidence.
question. Did you like a post that said it's quicker, that a bullet to the head would be a quicker way to remove Nancy Pelosi from the role of
I
Speaker?
have had many people manage my social media account over the years. I have no idea who liked that.
Okay. Are you testifying under oath it wasn't you? Just want to be clear on that.
I am testifying. I have no idea who liked that comment.
Fair enough. It could have been you. Right?
I am telling you,
answered the
I
question.
do not know.
She's answered the question. Go ahead. Next question. Yeah.
Okay. By the way, you know, Ms. Greene, that one of the places inside the United States Capitol building that was invaded by people who were doing violence was Ms. Pelosi's office, right?
I was inside the chamber on January 6th, so I do not know all the places that those people went. I only know where I was.
Are you telling us that in the more than a year since these events occurred, you have not become aware that one of the offices that was invaded by people who were illegally in the Capitol was Nancy Pelosi's office?
I've seen that on the news,
Okay.
but I
And-
don't know for sure. I haven't investigated all of that.
Now, you mentioned earlier in response to some of my questions that there was a demonstration that was being planned for January 6, 2021, called the March for Trump, right?
We talked about it on one of my Twitter posts.
Right. And that demonstration was being organized in part by an organization called Women for America, right?
I don't remember who organized it.
Okay. Ms. Wells, can you pull up Plaintiff's Exhibit 2D?
I'm sorry, which one was Kelly?
I'm sorry, 2D, Your Honor.
D or B?
D.
B is in boy.
No, D is in dog.
D is in
Sorry.
dog. Thank
And
you.
we're going to do this on paper, so I gotta. I placed in front of you what's a document that's been pre-marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 2D. Let me just begin by asking, one of the things that you can do on Twitter, Ms. Greene, is you can retweet or send out again somebody else's tweet, right?
Yes.
Okay. And on Plaintiff's 2D, which I placed in front of you, you are retweeting a tweet sent by Kylie Jane Kremer on December 19th, 2020, right?
I don't know if I retweeted it.
Well, if you look carefully, it says Margarie Taylor Greene. There's an American flag, and it says retweeted. As
I
your
don't know
testimony,
if I retweeted it.
you don't recall one way or the other.
I don't recall.
And it's your testimony that if this got retweeted from your account, that would have been done with your permission, right?
I don't recall retweeting it.
That's not my question. You don't deny that Kylie Jane Kremer's message was retweeted from your account in the form set forth as Plaintiff's 2D on December 20th, 2020. I'm sorry, December 19th. You don't deny that, do you?
This is what your picture has, this paper has. I don't have this Twitter account anymore. So I don't remember retweeting this.
Okay, but you do remember that there was this thing called the March for Trump. It was going to be on January 6th, right?
Yes.
And that Women for America were one of the organizers, right?
I don't remember, but that's what this says.
Okay. And one of the other hashtags for the demonstrations that were planned on January 6th, 2021 in Washington, D.C. Was a hashtag Stop the Steal. Hashtag Stop the Steal, right?
Stop, yes.
Yes. And another hashtag that got used at the time was, a website that was being used to organize people to come to Washington was something called wildprotest.com, right?
I don't know.
Okay. Let's have a look at PX33, please.
I'm sorry again, Mr. Shelley,
PX33.
PX, PX,
I call it PX. P33, Your Honor.
P33.
Plaintiff's Exhibit.
Oh, I got you, sorry.
I've placed before you, Ms. Greene, a document that we've marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit or Petitioner's Exhibit 33. And I'm just going to ask a couple questions about it. Does this refresh your recollection that there was a website known as wildprotest.com that was encouraging people to come to Washington for a protest on January 6th?
I don't remember the website, but I'm seeing it here on your paper.
Okay. And wild was the term that President Trump used to describe what he thought was going to happen on January 6th, right?
Wild is also a term that high schoolers use when they talk about spring break.
Fair enough. whatever the title of the demonstration or the name or the hashtag that was used, you would agree that you were aware after the election and before January 6th that people were being asked to come to D.C. for a large demonstration to object to the certification of Joe Biden as President of the United States, right?
I was aware people were coming to support our objection in Congress, and on January 6th, the only thing I was preparing for was objecting.
When did you first become aware that there were going to be large demonstrations in D.C. on the 6th?
I don't recall.
Did you consider at any point participating in any of those demonstrations?
It was put on my calendar, but then I never went. We were too busy. We were, looking at all the evidence and preparing for our debates and preparing to object.
And who put it on your calendar?
I don't know.
Somebody on your staff, I take it?
I have no idea.
Well, it wasn't a complete stranger, right? It was somebody from your congressional staff, right?
Probably so, but I have no idea.
And as you sit here, can you tell us why it is that an appearance for you at that demonstration was placed on your calendar?
Can you rephrase that question?
Sure. How did it come to pass that it was put on your calendar that you were going to appear at a demonstration? I understand you said you were too busy in the end.
I don't know. I was so busy just preparing to object. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. You were going to go to one of these demonstrations as a speaker, right?
I don't think so. I was always preparing to object. We were very busy.
Uh-huh. Well, have a look at what we've marked as number 33. And if you go about 3 pages in at the bottom of that page and then over to the next page, it says invited speakers and featured guests, right?
I'm assuming I guess I was on there because I was invited.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I don't know who made this website. I'm sorry, I can't answer
Okay. Well,
anything about it.
well, you can answer that that's your name and face, right?
That is my name and face, but I don't run that website. I have no idea who does.
My question to you, Representative Greene, is did you or someone under your authority at your congressional office authorize you to be placed as a speaker or guest of the wild protest demonstration?
I get many invitations as a member of Congress to many events and all kinds of speaking engagements, and most of the time those go on my calendar, but they have no relevance as to whether I attend or not.
So would it be fair to say, Ms. Greene, that through your office you authorized your name and your likeness to be associated with the wildprotest.com demonstration?
No, you cannot say that or assume that. That would be whoever organized this.
Well, let's talk about that. Going back to 33. You know Ali Alexander, don't you?
No, I don't really know him, no.
When you say you don't really know him, you've met him, right?
I've seen him before, but I don't know him.
Yeah, how many times have you been in his physical presence to your knowledge?
I cannot even guess. Hardly any.
10? 20?
No.
Have you shaken his hand?
I've shaken his hand before, yes. I
have you-
shake hands with pretty much everyone I meet.
Lots of people, right? And he's a friend of yours, right?
No.
Okay. We'll come back to that. Did you discuss with Mr. Alexander the idea of you coming to appear at a demonstration on January 6th?
I do not recall that, no.
You're not denying that happened, you just don't recall one way or the other?
I do not recall that, no.
Well, did you discuss with anybody attending the wild protest demonstration that was planned for January 6th?
I do not recall ever talking about attending.
Other than people on your congressional staff or your campaign staff, list for me all the people who you spoke to about the demonstrations on January 6th.
I'm sorry, I have no idea.
Okay. You don't remember any of them?
I do not remember.
Not any of them?
No.
Okay. And you spoke to some people about those demonstrations prior to being sworn in as a representative from the 14th District, right?
I don't remember.
And you spoke to some of those people after you took the oath on January 3rd and before the 6th, right?
I don't remember.
Did you speak to anybody in government about the fact that there were going to be demonstrations in Washington on January 6th?
I don't remember. We were mostly reading information about election fraud, and people signed affidavits about what they'd witnessed with voter fraud and preparing to object. That was pretty much all I remember doing.
Right, pretty much. But your testimony as you sit here today under oath is that you didn't talk to anybody in government about the fact that there were going to be large protests in Washington on January 6th.
I don't remember.
You spoke to Representative Biggs or his staff about that fact, didn't you?
I do not remember.
How about Representative Gosar?
I'm sorry, I don't remember.
Did you talk to people at the White House about the fact that there were going to be large demonstrations on January 6th in Washington?
I don't remember.
Prior to January 6th, Representative Greene, did anyone ever mention to you the possibility that there might be violence in Washington on January 6th, 2021?
I don't remember.
Okay. So it's possible that folks told you things could get violent in Washington on January 6th, right?
I was a brand new member of Congress. If I don't remember those conversations, but I would hope Nancy Pelosi and those in charge of the Capitol were taking the Capitol security very seriously.
My question is just about whether anybody at all ever mentioned to you the possibility of violence.
I don't remember.
Okay, so you're not denying it, you're just saying you don't recall.
I don't recall.
And you don't recall that people said, you know, we're having these big demonstrations in Washington, and some of the people who come to those demonstrations might become violent. That never happened.
The only violence I'd ever seen was Antifa and BLM riots, and I've been to so many Trump rallies, have never once seen violence out of Trump people.
Right.
I don't recall any talk of violence.
And you knew that the people who were coming for the demonstrations on January 6th, those were Trump people, right?
I knew there were many people coming to support President Trump and our objection on January 6th.
Right, and at least some of them were coming because you asked them to come, right?
I don't recall personally asking people to come, but evidently I tweeted about January 6th.
Did anybody, strike that, did you have any conversations with anybody in government, representatives, senators, White House staff, the President of the United States at the time, any government official or government employee about the fact, this is now prior to January 6th, about the fact that there was a risk that people coming to Washington for January 6th demonstrations might become violent?
I object. That's the fourth time he's asked the same question. She's repeatedly
It's not the same
saying,
question.
This is the
Oh,
last
it
time.
really is the same question.
I will let it, what, you can ask questions last time.
I don't recall.
Ms. Greene, did you ever hear that from any source prior to January 6th that some folks were planning to come to Washington on January 6th, and the idea was that they were going to flood the Capitol with people?
No, I don't remember ever hearing that.
Okay. You never discussed that with anybody?
No, I do not remember that.
But you supported the idea of people coming to Washington on January 6th and flooding the Capitol, right?
No, I support people's First Amendment to have a peaceful protest, use their freedom of speech.
Well, previously you've publicly said that one way for people to express their displeasure with their government would be to flood the Capitol building with people, right?
The Capitol belongs to the people. That's where you come and speak to your senators, your representatives. You come to express your views. You come to talk about how you want your tax dollars spent. You come to talk about how you want senators or representatives to vote.
My question is a bit more narrow than that. You publicly expressed support for the idea that people should come to Washington to express their displeasure with their government by flooding the Capitol.
I don't
I
remember.
object.
She's answered the question. Next, move on.
Can we have PX 23, please? Ms. Greene, I've placed in front of you what we've previously marked as Petitioner's Exhibit 23, which is a CNN article entitled, in 2019, Margarie Taylor Greene told protesters to flood the Capitol and feel free to use violence.
Your Honor, I object. This is 2019. How many years back? High school? Do we have to be treated with statements that, like, flood the Capitol? Flood the Capitol?
Your Honor, this is a
There
speaking
are-
objection. It's not appropriate.
Go ahead. If you can figure out how you're going to lay the foundation for this, you may proceed. Go
Okay.
ahead, Mr. Shelley.
Thank you. I want to direct your attention, Representative Greene, to the second page of this exhibit.
Mr. Shelley, could you please go through the proper things so she knows what she's looking at?
Yes, well, I thought I did, but
I didn't hear it. I'm sorry.
okay. Ms. Greene, this is an article that appeared, we believe, on CNN in the wake of January 6th. And I ask if you've seen this document before.
No, I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to ask some questions about statements that are attributed to you in this article, and you can tell me whether you made them or not, okay? The second page of the document has a quotation that reads, quote, "All of us together, when we rise up, we can end all of this. We can end it. We can do it peacefully. We can. I hope we don't have to do it the other way. I hope not. But we should feel like we will if we have to, because we are the American people." Do you recall making that statement in 2019 in connection with a protest around Fund the Wall?
No, I don't
object.
recall.
Ask Nancy. Go
I
ahead.
object.
Next.
Are you denying that you made that statement?
Objection noted.
You denying that you made that statement?
I'm saying I don't recall.
Okay. You're not
This
denying
is-
it, you just don't recall.
It's a CNN article.
She says she does not recall. That is the answer. Let's move on.
I'm missing a page here. Can you scroll back? Further up, please. Yeah, keep going. I'm sorry, Judge. I think I'm missing a page in my copy of the exhibit.
Okay.
Going. I'm sorry, the bottom of, yeah, down a little bit. All right, thank you for that. You can stop right there. A little further along in the article, I'm just going to ask you whether you made this comment. If we have a sea of people, we will shut down the streets. If we shut down everything. If we flood the Capitol building. Go inside. These are public buildings. We own them. We own these buildings. Do you understand that? We own the buildings and we pay all the people that work in the buildings. Did you say that in connection with the Fund the Wall demonstration in February of 2019.
And because it's about the fund the wall demonstration, after she was sworn in as a member of Congress and had taken
It's
the
irrelevant.
completely irrelevant to what she
I'm inclined to agree with Mr. Let's go on.
think.
Let's move on.
Did you say that?
I don't recall. You're using CNN, and they've chopped up my words so many times. They've lied about me so many times. I mean, you sound like you have as many conspiracy theories as QAnon at this point.
Well, you believe in QAnon, right?
No, I did not say I believe in QAnon.
Let's
You-
move
you-
on.
you don't
It's
believe in
not-
QAnon?
This is not relevant. Let's move on.
She brought it up, Your Honor. Can we get PX 84, please, Ms. Wells?
Which one?
84?
84?
Is that your face, Ms. Greene?
It appears to be.
Okay. So this is a video clip. I'm going to ask that we play it. It's about 1 minute 50 seconds, and simply ask if that's you making those statements.
Your Honor, before he starts running this, I object unless he assures us that this is the complete clip, not selected out
Right.
pieces, that is the entire.
We haven't touched it, Your Honor.
Okay.
I'm not saying you touched it.
Right, well-
This is on, that you're prepared to play this. I think your responsibility, and I'm asking the court to require this, or I object, is to make sure that this is not taken out of context. You want to present it as evidence. I think you should be required to explain that this is the entire statement that was made, not some selected piece out of context.
May I be heard on this, Your Honor?
Sure, of course. Go ahead, Mr.
Your Honor, we have been denied the opportunity to conduct discovery in this case, as Your Honor knows, given the speed with which this proceeding had to go forward. We have been denied the opportunity to issue subpoenas, to get records, to do precisely what Mr. Bopp would like me to do. In fact, Mr. Bopp objected to all of those things and said, we don't want them to do those things. So the idea now that he is objecting to us playing a portion of his own client's words, she can defend herself quite ably. She will tell us if it's out of context or if it's QAnon or something
Let's
else.
back up. First of all, what is this again?
This is a video, we believe, of the Congresswoman making a statement.
And where did it come from?
It came from the CNN article, links to it, from Facebook.
So this was pulled off of what, the internet?
Well, it was connected through CNN, I believe. No, through the from a tweet.
Okay, next question. This is the complete, that's what was there? Is
That's
that
what was there, yes.
Okay, have you made any alterations?
No, sir.
Are you aware of any alterations?
No, sir.
Okay. Do we know when it was made?
We believe it was made in February of 2019, but I think
You can now ask the witness this about it.
can we play the video, please?
in Washington, D.C. on February 23rd and protest and march with me at 8 a.m. Really? Please, I'm begging you. If we have, if we have a sea of people, if we shut down the streets, if we shut down everything, if we flood the Capitol building, flood all the government buildings, go inside. These are public buildings. We own them. We own these buildings. Do you understand that? We own the buildings and we pay all the people that work in the buildings. You know what? February 23rd may be kind of cold. We're going to go inside. We're going to be warm. And then we're going to demand that our federal government serve we the people. Because we're sick and tired of their ways. We're sick and tired of the corruption. See, here's the issue. Here's the issue, America. They think that we're stupid, and they treat us like we're stupid, and we allow it. We allow it. Well, no more. We're not going to allow it anymore. We want solutions to the problems. We want to take care of America. America is first. Americans come first with Americans' taxpayer dollars. We're done. We're done. And we have a massive list of grievances, okay? We have a huge list of grievances. And that's why on February 23rd in Washington, D.C., at 8 a.m., we're going to march and protest. And I am telling you to get your butt there. I'm begging all of you to be there. Be there. Let's make this huge. There's a lot of really, really great people organizing this. You don't even know.
Ms. Greene, that's you, right?
That's me.
And in that clip, you were urging people to come to Washington and flood the Capitol, right?
What year was that?
You tell me, Ms. Greene.
I believe it was for February 23rd, 2019.
Right.
There was no violence that day. We peacefully protested.
Fair enough. But my point is to ask you the question. You were urging people for that demonstration to flood the
To
Capitol.
peacefully protest with me and enter the Capitol and ask our lawmakers to serve the American people.
So now you remember giving that statement, right?
Now that we've watched the video, I remember that.
Now that your memory has been jogged a little bit, do you remember talking about that demonstration being done on a peaceful basis?
That demonstration was peaceful.
Right. And you remember that you said, we can do it peacefully, right?
Of course, I only believe in peaceful demonstration. I do not support violence.
In fact, what you said is, we can do it peacefully. We can. I hope we don't have to do it the other way. I hope not. But we should feel like we will if we have to, because we are the American people. That was another statement that you made in the same presentation, right?
That was in your CNN article, and I don't trust CNN as a source. They've lied about me multiple times.
Are you denying that under oath, that you made that statement?
I'm not. I just don't recall. I'm not recalling saying specifically that. The demonstration was peaceful. History shows that.
What year was this again?
2019. It has nothing to do with January 6th.
I'll move on, Your Honor.
You're pushing the envelope, Joe.
I thought you already fallen off the cliff.
No comments. No comments. Mr.
Yeah, I'd appreciate if Mr. Bach would keep his humor to himself for the moment. He can do that in the cameras outside when the time comes.
Gentlemen, and I'm serious. We need to get back to task.
Ms. Greene, did you or any member of your government or campaign staff communicate with Anthony Aguero about the events of January 6th, prior to January 6th?
I don't recall.
Did you or any member of your staff, either congressional staff or campaign staff, communicate with somebody named Dustin Stockton prior to January 6th?
I don't think I know who that is.
Okay. How about Jennifer Lawrence? Not the actress, but a Jennifer Lawrence who's involved in conservative politics. Did you or any member of your congressional campaign staff communicate with Ms. Lawrence prior to January 6th about the demonstrations that were planned for that day?
I don't recall. I don't think I know who that is.
Did you or any member of your campaign or congressional staff, Ms. Greene, provide any support for any demonstrations that occurred on January 6, 2021?
I have no idea. I don't think so. I don't recall.
Did you or any member of your staff provide information, advice, funds, printed material, the promise of a public statement, to withhold a public statement, anything along those lines in connection with the demonstrations that were planned for January 6th?
I don't remember. I don't think so.
And if somebody were to come in here and say, oh yeah, she gave us support for our demonstrations, you'd say, I don't remember that. That didn't happen.
I'm not sure what you're saying. I think you're speculating. That's hypothetical.
Prior to January 6, 2021, you heard that people were planning to enter the Capitol on January 6th and engage in violence, right?
No.
I object that. I think that's the fifth time he's
Well, no, she answered the question. No. Next.
Never heard that from anybody.
No.
Yeah. And prior to January 6, 2021, you were aware that people were going to make noise outside the Capitol as a means to disrupt the proceedings inside the Capitol. Is that fair?
No, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay. And prior to January 6, 2021, had you heard that people were planning to enter the Capitol building illegally in order to disrupt the electoral count process?
No, absolutely not. I don't know anything about that.
Okay. Your Honor, it's I think 12:45 is.
Well, let's talk about that. How much longer do you think you need, Mr.
You know, probably an hour.
All right, well, why don't we take I'm going to change. Let's take an hour, and let's be back here at 12:45, so that's 1:45, right? Did I do that right?
Could I respect 21?
No, absolutely not.
You're familiar with a group called the Proud Boys?
I've heard of them.
And you know that the Proud Boys, it has developed, had a written plan for conduct on January 6, 2021, right?
No, I did not know that.
Okay. The Proud Boys are an extremist, violent group. You would agree with that?
I don't know much about the Proud Boys.
You've never heard that they're a violent extremist group?
I've heard about them. I don't know what they do. I don't know much about the Proud Boys.
And you haven't heard that the written plan attributed to the Proud Boys for January 6th was called 1776 Returns.
No, I have no idea anything about that.
Never heard that. Okay. Let's pull up PX 39. This is an article that appeared in the New York Times on March 14, 2020, entitled "Document in Jan 6 Case Shows Plan to Storm Government Buildings." Do you see this document?
I've never seen it, no.
Let me get you a copy so you can have a look. Do you need the number? It's 30. What to do about that? We had 100%. Ms. Greene, did you see a story in the New York Times or in any other publication or media outlet in March of 2022 about Proud Boys having a written plan to storm government buildings on January 6th?
No, I've never, I don't recall, never heard anything about it.
Never heard of that. Never heard that that was called 1776 Returns, that plan that the government alleges Proud Boys had to storm government buildings.
No, I've never heard of it.
You were aware prior to January 6th that 1776 referred to an idea or a plan for people who were opposed to the certification of the Electoral College vote to infiltrate and occupy buildings in D.C.
No.
Never heard that.
No.
And you were aware prior to January 6, 2021, that 1776 was a term that people were using to describe a plan or an idea to physically interfere and prevent the Electoral College vote.
No, I don't know anything about that.
Okay. You can put that to one side. We talked a little bit about a person named Allie Alexander this morning. Do you remember that testimony?
Mm-hmm.
And you said somebody you've met on a number of occasions, is that fair?
I've seen him a couple times. I don't remember when, and it's not someone I know.
Let's pull up 67, please, PS 67 as well. Let's just start. I'm going to ask you to have a look at just the first 10 seconds of the video. It's just a person not even speaking, and tell me if you can identify that person, okay? You know that person?
That's Ollie Alexander.
Let's go, thank you. Let's go to minute 11:20. This is a rather long clip, and I'm going to take you to the middle of it, around 11 minutes and 20 seconds.
For anything, go ahead. Members of Congress are on a committee. Congressman Steve King was the only one who was yanked off of all committees. So that's not true. So avoid the disinformation, avoid the division. We are here to continue pressing forward. Yeah, Congresswoman Margarie Greene, my favorite, she's coming in, a friend of mine, she's coming in, she'll be whatever. Someone's trying to tell me.
You can stop it there. You see that Mr. Alexander describes you as his favorite, right? You heard him say that.
That's what he said. I just saw it.
Okay. Do you have any explanation for why you would feel that way?
Maybe he likes the work I do. I don't know. I don't really know him that well. I've only met him a couple of times.
He describes himself as you as a friend of his, right? That's what he
Those
said on the
were
video.
his words.
Right, that's what he said in the video. Is he lying when he describes himself as a friend of yours?
I wouldn't call him a friend. I do not know him. I've only met him a couple of times.
Okay. So if he says he was a friend of yours, he would be lying.
Sometimes people say things on videos for their followers or to maybe, I don't know. That's what he said. I don't know him. I've only met him a couple of times.
In fact, Mr. Alexander was very active on Twitter in the post-election 2020 period up until January 6th. Isn't that right?
I don't know. I don't follow his account.
Okay. Let's go to well, I think we've established that during that post-election period, from November when you were elected until January 6th, one of the things you were doing was organizing people in Congress to file objections to the Electoral College count, right?
Yes, working very hard on objecting.
Okay. Let's go to PX3, please. As well as if you could scroll it up so that we can see the bottom half first. Yeah. Further down, please. I'll get you a paper copy. Ms. Greene, I want to focus your attention on the box in the middle of the page that says Margarie Taylor GRE ... 12/30/20. Do you see that?
Yes.
And that's a Twitter comment that you made on December 30th, 2020, right?
I don't recall making that tweet, but that's what this piece of paper says.
Okay. Do you have any doubt that a tweet from your account was issued on December 30th, 2020, that said, quote, "Word on the Hill is that Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi could be working together on a rules change deal to block our Electoral College certification objection"?
I don't recall this tweet.
My question is a little bit different. Do you have any doubt that this is a tweet from your account?
I don't know.
Do you recall in late December of 2020 hearing a rumor on Capitol Hill about a deal between Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi to create a rules change so as to block the objections to the Electoral College count?
I can't really remember. It's been 16 months or so ago.
That would be pretty important, wouldn't it? If they changed the rules so that you couldn't object to the Electoral College count, right?
It would have been, but there was no rule change. We were still able to object, or at least we tried anyways.
But by this point in December of 2020, your focus was on objecting to the Electoral College count in Congress, right?
Yes, finding evidence of voter fraud and planning to object, yes.
Okay. And if there had been rumors of a rule change, that would be something that would be important for you to tweet out and talk about publicly.
It possibly would have been. I just don't remember this tweet. I don't remember it.
You know that Ali Alexander has responded to tweets that you've sent out over the years, right?
I don't know. I have no idea who retweets and who responds. That's not something that I spend much time at all looking at.
You spend some time looking at it, though, don't you, Representative Greene? Who responds to your tweets?
Occasionally, I have some time and I look at who responds, but I do not know what he has responded, what he has tweeted or retweeted.
Okay. And the reason that you look at responses to your tweets is you want to see how what you've said is being taken on board by other people. Is that fair?
Actually, I don't really look at comments on Twitter because they're filled with a lot of bots and a lot of hateful people, and I don't like to read things like that, so I don't read many comments, hardly ever.
Well, you read Mr. Alexander's response to your December 30th tweet that's shown in Exhibit 3, right? And just to read it out loud, what he writes is, "If they do this, everyone can guess what me and 500,000 others will do to that building. 1776 is always an option." You read that, didn't you?
If this is his Twitter, I see it on the screen. I have no idea. Those are his words, I guess. I have no idea.
Well, as you sit here today, you understand that what Mr. Alexander was referring to was not legal objections on the floor of the Congress, right?
No, I don't know what he's referring to.
And you knew back then that what Mr. Alexander was responding to your tweet was to say, if they make a rules change and Congresswoman Taylor Greene can't object, we're going to go into the Capitol and do violence.
I have no idea. I don't know anything about this.
And that term 1776 is the way Mr. Alexander was conveying that to his listeners or his readers.
I have no idea. Again, I don't know anything about this. I've never seen it before.
Between January 3rd and January 6th, 2021, Ms. Greene, you viewed the Electoral College certification of Joe Biden as a blow to freedom. Is that fair?
I viewed it as we needed to object because there was so much evidence and so many people had signed their name. Thousands of people had signed their name on affidavits saying they witnessed voter fraud. And that meant something to me because I care about the people and I care about their votes and I care about our election integrity.
My question is whether you viewed it as a blow to freedom if the Electoral College certification of Joe Biden were completed.
I don't agree with your wording.
Okay. Because once freedom is gone, it doesn't come back by itself, right?
I don't agree with your wording.
The only way you can get freedom back is when it's earned with the price of blood. Those are your words, right?
You're twisting my words and creating a narrative that you're trying to make. That's not my narrative. That's not what I said.
Well,
That's
on
not what I
October
meant for
27th,
that.
2020, that's what you said and that's what you meant, right?
I'm sorry.
Yeah. On October 27th, 2020, when you did the interview with Mr. Dorr, when you said the only way to get freedoms back is when it's earned with blood, that's what you meant, right?
Well, you showed a video that's chopped up that doesn't show even my full sentences. So no, I don't agree with what you're saying.
Do you have any explanation, Representative Greene, for why it is that on January 5th, the day before January 6th, you described January 6th as our 1776 moment?
I don't remember. Seeing this interview is the first time I've seen it in a long time. I don't remember.
Now, prior to January 6, 2021, you spoke publicly on your Facebook page about the transfer of power that would occur on January 6th. You recall that?
I don't recall.
Okay. You said on a video on your Facebook page that the peaceful transfer of power ought not be allowed to occur.
I don't recall.
You said that the peaceful transfer of power cannot be allowed to occur because Joe Biden didn't win the 2020 election, right?
I don't recall.
Let's go to the videotape. Can we start with? So it's probably best if I explain this. There are two versions of this, and I'm going to ask about both of them. And you can tell me if you think they've been chopped up in any way. They have been chopped up, that's true. But you'll tell me whether you were misinterpreted, okay? The first one is PX 66. Yes, can you play that one?
Okay, just a second. What's the date and the source of the video?
The source it was something, Ms. Greene's Facebook page is not available. This is something that was captured by someone else and posted on another Facebook page.
Where it says it's from her Facebook page?
Yes, I believe it does. 66 has been admitted, Your Honor, as evidence.
And
Yeah,
what's
it's been
the-
admitted for what it's worth, so go ahead.
Yeah, and what is the date?
We're going to ask your client that, Mr. Bond.
Okay, you don't know,
And this is an important time in our history. We can't allow this just to be gone, just to let it go. You can't allow it to just transfer power peacefully like Joe Biden wants and allow him to become our president because he did not win this election. It's being stolen and the evidence is there.
Okay. So that's you, right, Ms. Greene?
Yes, that's me.
Okay. And when you say we can't allow it, we can't just let it go, the it in that phrase is to have Joe Biden declared the winner of the 2020 presidential election.
You are showing a video where it doesn't give us any reference beforehand and it doesn't give us any reference afterwards. So it's not really my complete, it's hard to get an understanding of what I was saying.
Okay, so your answer is you don't know what you're referring to.
I don't. We are watching a partial video and a partial statement of clearly an interview I was doing. I don't know what date it was on, and it's definitely off someone else's Twitter or Facebook. I can't see it from here.
Well, that's you saying you can't allow it to transfer power peacefully like Joe Biden wants and allow him to become our president because he did not win this election. That's you saying that, right?
That's the partial statement on that video.
Okay. Can we pull up?
But do we see the whole thing?
We can run the rest of it.
Let's see the whole thing.
Sure, and there's another one on top of it, so we'll watch
I
two.
mean, well, you said they're different. I want to be sure that she has an opportunity to see what the difference
Can
is.
I make a suggestion, Your Honor? Let's
Yes.
go back to the beginning of this one, and then
Yeah.
we'll play it all the way through.
That would be good. I agree. Let's do that.
And this is an important time in our history. We can't allow this just to be gone, just to let it go. You can't allow it to just transfer power peacefully like Joe Biden wants and allow him to become our president, because he did not win this election. It's being stolen and the evidence is there. The mainstream media for 4 years talked about Russian collusion, conspiracy theories, and lies, and demanded investigations nonstop into Russian collusion. Nonstop. But yet they refused to. And this is an important time in our history.
Is that where it ended? It just sort of cut off there. Okay, let's show the witness PX 12. Let me hold off on that for 1 second. This video that we just saw, which we've marked as plaintiff 66, that's a video that you made in anticipation of objecting to the Electoral College count in favor of Joe Biden, right?
I don't know. I don't see a date. It's not from my specific Facebook page. It appears to be on someone else's.
Let's see the other video, number 12.
And where is this one from?
This is also, it's the same thing. It was taken, I believe, off of the video, off the Facebook page of the client, of the Congresswoman, but let's ask her.
But where did y'all get it?
Where do we get this?
It's off the Facebook, off of the Republican Accountability Project.
Okay, so this is a secondary source that was
Yes.
copied, but that's where you got it from.
Yeah,
So
right.
this is a different version.
Correct.
Okay. You want to go ahead and play it?
Hold on 1 second. And this one is also admitted into evidence, Your Honor,
For what it's worth.
for what it's worth.
America reelected Donald J. Trump for 4 more years. You can't allow it to just transfer power peacefully like Joe Biden wants and allow him to become our president, because he did not win this election. It's being stolen and the evidence is there. There's a large group of us. We're organizing an effort to object to the Electoral College votes for Joe Biden in key states where there's real evidence that this election has been stolen. I am very convicted in what we're going to be doing on January 6th, and it's historic, and I feel it's very, very important. On January 6th, if you're able, there are going to be possibly 1 million or more people coming to Washington to be there for this historic event. It's critical for everyone to show up and show the nation who we are. We aren't a people that are going to go quietly into the night. We are not a people that are going to be thrust into socialism without stopping it.
Now that you've seen that clip, Representative Greene, do you agree that this is a video that you created in anticipation of objecting to the Electoral College vote on January 6th?
This video on the Democrat leftist PAC Republican accountability group that looks to be chopped up and spliced, that video, that's not my full video.
Listen to my
It's-
question.
Yes.
The words that are shown that you're speaking on the screen, those are things that you were talking about in anticipation of objecting to the Electoral College count vote on the floor of Congress, right?
The only thing I was working on was objecting, but again, that's a cut and spliced video.
And when you said we're organizing an effort to object to the Electoral College votes on the video, the we were members of Congress, right?
Well, members of Congress are the only ones that can object. That's part of our ability. That's what we're allowed to do lawfully.
Right. Exactly. And making objections is, in fact, by members of Congress, is part of the lawful transfer of power, right?
Objecting is part of the electoral count process. Democrats did it with the past 3 Republican presidents that were elected. They objected, and I'm sure there was a lot of planning that went into that and discussion. We put a lot of planning, a lot of work into it, and as you can see, we talked about it.
So when you were talking about we can't allow it to happen, you can't just let it go. You can't allow it to transfer power peacefully like Joe Biden wants and allow him to become our president because he didn't win. You weren't talking about objections on the floor of the Congress, were you?
What I believe what I was referencing is we can't allow the electoral count to happen without objecting. That I felt it was our dutiful responsibility to object on behalf of the large amount of voter fraud and the people who truly felt like that there was big problems in our elections.
And you're testifying under oath that that's what you meant when you said you can't allow it to transfer power peacefully like Joe Biden wants and allow him to become our president. That was a reference to
Without objecting. Without objecting.
Of course, you don't say anything in that part of the video about objections on the floor of the Congress, right? Would you like to see it again?
I believe the video, I said objecting.
But in the sentence where you said you can't allow it to transfer power peacefully like Joe Biden wants and allow him to become our president because he didn't win the election, you don't say anything in that sentence about objections on the floor of the Congress.
Sir, we just saw 2 videos that are cut and clipped, and my sentences aren't even completed. I think the first video started with me saying "and," meaning it was starting into partially something I was already saying. What I was, from the video and my recollection from watching him just then, it was purely talking about objecting.
One of the things that you say in these videos is that you call upon people to come to Washington on January 6th, right?
I don't remember every single word that we just watched.
Let's look at it again. I think P12 is the one that includes that.
America reelected Donald J. Trump for 4 more years. You can't allow it to just transfer power peacefully like Joe Biden wants and allow him to become our president because he did not win this election. It's being stolen and the evidence is there. There's a large group of us. We're organizing an effort to object to the Electoral College votes for Joe Biden in key states where there's real evidence that this election has been stolen. I am very convicted in what we're going to be doing on January 6th, and it's historic, and I feel it's very, very important. On January 6th, if you're able, there are going to be possibly 1 million or more people coming to Washington to be there for this historic event. It's critical for everyone to show up and show.
So in that segment, Representative Greene, you're asking people to come to Washington on January 6th.
In this video, which I saw jump 3 times, which means it's been cut and spliced, yes, I did talk about people coming there to support our objection peacefully, support our objection, support President Trump.
How did you know that there might be 1 million or more people coming to Washington on January 6th? Did you just make that up, or somebody tell you that?
I believe those were the numbers being talked about at the time.
By who?
The media, just different
People who were
sources.
planning the demonstrations?
I have no idea. I think I saw that on the news.
And what you said is it's critical for everyone to show up, right? That's what we saw.
Supporting, peacefully supporting our objection. That's the only thing I was interested in doing and planning is objecting.
Now, the last thing you say in the video is, we aren't a people that are going to go quietly into the night. Do you recall that part?
Yes.
Now, that phrase, we aren't a people that are going to go quietly into the night, that's not something that you came up with on your own, is it?
I have no idea what you mean.
Well, that's something that you borrowed from a movie script, right?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay. You borrowed that line from the movie Independence Day, right?
No.
Wow. Let's go to the videotape as well.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, the timestamp is 108 to 144. Hold on one second. You've seen the movie Independence Day, right?
I've seen it before.
It's a great movie, right?
I think it's probably a great movie. I haven't watched movies in a long time, but from what I remember, it's a great movie.
This is the one about the aliens who come to the world, and then there's a big battle on July 4th to ward them off, right?
You are giving us quite the entertainment today. Thank you.
Okay. And there's a scene in that movie where the president, the guy who's playing the president of the United States, addresses the fighter pilots who are about to go into battle against the aliens. Remember that scene?
I do not remember, no, but I'm sure you're going to show us.
Yeah.
Can we see the whole thing?
Yeah, can we watch the whole movie?
It's a great movie.
We're fighting for our right to live, to exist. And should we win the day, the 4th of July will no longer be known as an American holiday, but as the day when the world declared in one voice, we will not go quietly into the night. We will not vanish without a fight. We're going to live on. We're going to survive. Today, we celebrate our Independence Day.
Great scene, right?
Yeah, that was a great scene.
And the phrase that the actor uses there is, we will not go quietly into the night. You heard that.
Heard it just now, yes.
And that's the exact phrase that you use in the video that we saw that was the previous exhibit. We aren't the people that are going to go quietly into the night.
I don't view courtrooms and politics as Hollywood like you do. That is not the first person, I'm sure, that said that and won't be the last. And I don't recall getting any inspiration from this Hollywood movie like you're suggesting.
So you were not communicating in referencing that film that January 6th was going to be a new kind of Independence Day.
All I was talking about is objecting and standing up for people's votes in our elections.
By the way, Independence Day is July 4th, right?
Yes,
It's July 4th of 1776, right?
that's right.
Your Honor, this might be a good time to break if we're on schedule.
How, well,
I've got a pretty short piece left, but it's up to you.
I don't need a break.
let's keep going. Great. I mean, again, if we're talking, 30 minutes, we're talking 2 hours.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's 2 hours. Ms. Greene, did you advocate to President Trump to impose martial law as a way to remain in power?
I don't recall.
So you're not denying you did it, you just don't remember?
I don't remember.
Okay. And do you agree that the storming of the Capitol on January 6th is something that's despicable?
Yes. Very unhappy about it.
Now, we talked earlier about a fellow named Anthony Aguero, right?
You brought up Anthony Aguero earlier.
Right.
Yes.
And he's somebody who you know, yes?
Yes.
And he's somebody who you've spent a fair amount of time with, is that fair?
Not much time, no.
He's a friend of yours,
Someone that I do know, yes.
and you consider him a friend?
Someone I hardly ever talk to, but someone I have known for a few years.
Okay. And he is a friend of yours, right?
A distant friend, someone I know.
He refers to you as one of his closest friends. You've heard that, right?
I have not.
Okay. And you refer to him as amazing, right?
He does a lot of great work down at the border showing the illegal invasion constantly happening at our southern border. I think that's amazing, the footage that he shows and exposes.
Okay. And you know that Mr. Aguero entered the Capitol, on the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2001, right?
I had heard that sometime after January 6th.
And you've seen a picture of him in the middle of the crowd in the Capitol Rotunda on January 6, 2020.
No, I have not seen that picture.
Let's have a look at PX 13B, please. Make that a little bit bigger. Representative Greene, is that man in the red circle on the left of our Exhibit 13B, is that Mr. Aguero?
I don't know. I can't really tell.
If I told you that it was reported that that was Mr. Aguero and that he acknowledged that publicly, would that help you discern that that's who that is?
I don't really buy a whole lot of what you say. You've been using CNN and Mother Jones and other terrible sources as your sources and showing Hollywood movies. So, but that's what you're trying to say now, but I don't know if that's him or not.
I'm just asking whether if I suggested to you that he's acknowledged publicly that that's him in the Capitol Rotunda, would that help you identify him as your friend, Mr. Aguero?
I don't see your evidence of him acknowledging that that's him.
Okay. I think we can probably do something with that. Can I see 13, please? I have it here. If I showed you something from CNN, you probably wouldn't accept it as authentic, would you? I think we've established that today. We'll move on. Have you spoken to Mr. Aguero since January 6th?
I don't recall speaking to him, no.
Or communicate with him in any way, text, email?
No, I don't recall, no.
And did you communicate with Mr. Aguero at any point prior to January 6th about the plans for a demonstration in Washington on January 6th?
No, I didn't. Now, did he have press credentials? I mean, there was a lot of press in there, and that's the job that he does with a border media company that he works with. So I have no idea about what, I have no clue about it.
Okay. Were you aware that he was going to be, in his capacity, I guess, as a member of the press, present on January 6th in Washington for the demonstrations that were planned?
No, I was not aware.
Did he communicate with any member of your staff in any way, by text or email, cell phone about the fact that he'd be coming to Washington?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Did you ever discuss with Mr. Aguero the idea that on January 6th, as part of the demonstration, the U.S. Capitol was going to be flooded by people?
No, because the only thing I was working on objecting and had no expectation of anything that happened on January 6th.
Well, you knew there were going to be demonstrations, right?
I knew there was a peaceful march planned.
On January 6th itself, were you in contact with anyone who was involved in what you described as the peaceful march that occurred that day?
No.
Was anybody from your staff, congressional staff, or your campaign staff in touch by cell phone, text, email with anybody who was involved in the day's demonstrations?
Not of my knowledge.
At any time on January 6th, did you disclose to anyone outside the Capitol your location in the Capitol during that day's events?
I texted my family and told them I was safe.
Okay. Anybody other than family?
No.
When on January 6th did you first learn that people were entering the United States Capitol unlawfully that day?
When we were in the House chamber, we were starting the electoral count, and we went on lockdown, and that's when I first learned of it. I was shocked.
And do you know what time of day that was?
I don't know the exact time.
And when you went on lockdown, as you described it, why don't you tell us what that meant, what you mean by that?
They had to lock all the doors in the House chamber, and they told us that it was on lockdown and that we could choose to leave or stay inside, and it would be safer inside. And so I stayed inside.
Okay. And when you say you stayed inside, where did you stay?
Inside the House chamber.
Okay. And during that time that you were on the in lockdown, as you put it, on the House floor, you said you were in touch with your family to tell them you were safe?
Not at that time, no.
Okay. When did that happen in the day?
Sometime later after we were evacuated.
And where were you evacuated to?
I can't disclose that location.
Somewhere in the Capitol?
Mm-hmm.
And when you were in that other location in the Capitol, I presume that would be a secure location, is that right?
Yes.
Did you have any communication, either by phone, by text, some other way, with anybody who was outside the room, outside the secure location you were in, other than your family?
Not that I recall, no.
And when you were notified that people had entered the Capitol illegally, did you also understand at that point that there had been violence at the Capitol?
I only knew what I was told. I'd heard a gunshot. We all heard it. And we were so confused. We thought Antifa was breaking in, or BLM, because of those were the riots that had gone on and on all throughout 2020, day in and day out. Just horrible riots all over the country, and that was the only thing that made sense to most of us.
What do you mean by BLM?
BLM rioters.
Is that an acronym for something?
Black Lives Matter rioters. Rioters that were attending the Black Lives Matter protest.
To your knowledge, has anybody connected with the Black Lives Matter movement or the Antifa movement, as you say, been subject to arrest or charge in connection with the January 6th events?
I don't know, actually. I know they were arrested all over the country much through 2020, and over 95% of them had their charges dropped, unlike January 6 rioters that are still in jail, some of them, pre-trial.
Could I have a few moments to consult, and then I think I may be done.
Sure, just, yeah, we don't need a break, do we? Okay. Okay.
5 minutes would be
You want a
great.
5-minute break? Well, if y'all want to step out, that might be easier for
Yeah,
everybody
that'd
else.
be great.
I think there's a room next door that probably definitely that spares everybody having to go and come. So. If you want to step down, stretch your legs, feel free to do so.
No, I'm doing fine.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I know
How are you doing?
we're going to all get through today, but it'll be fine.
You see, the market